I'm very excited to welcome you to Montessori Home Environment, created and presented by Katie Veatch. We are so honored to share these educational webinars with you, and we've got an exciting lineup set up for the new year. And so keep your eyes peeled on our social media pages to get an idea of what we'll have to look forward to in the new year. But now it is my absolute pleasure to introduce you to the brilliant intentional nanny, Katie Veatch.
Hi again. I'm so nervous. You can't call me brilliant. I put together a lot of information for you guys, so I hope it feels helpful, and I am so glad you're here. Thank you for being here. And actually, since I'm not going to get to see your faces very much because I'm going to be in my PowerPoint, I just want to take an extra moment right now and just take a breath and express gratitude. I worked at a school for a while, and every time we started a meeting, we always started with a gratitude. And so I just want to say that I'm really glad you're here. I recognize that this is a really hard time to be human on planet Earth right now for a lot of us. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. It feels really good to share this space with you. And I'm really glad you're here. And if you have any gratitudes at all, if you have like a cool cat sitting on your lap or whatever it is, if you want to drop it in the chat, you're welcome to. I think it would be fun to check that out. But in the meantime, let's see, I'm going to, Eleni, I can just go ahead and share my screen, right? I can do that. Okay. So I'm not a tech wizard. So I may know a lot about Montessori, but I don't know a lot about this. So bear with me. We're going to go through this together. Here we go. Okay. So I'm going to hit present mode and let's see. Can you all see this presentation right here? Okay. And I'm just pulling up my notes here too. So welcome. I want to share with you first and foremost, this is my email. You're welcome to email me at any point if you have questions after today, 6 weeks from now, a year, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. You're welcome to email me. I would love to collaborate with you and let's chat. So here I am. Come find me. Oh, no, let's see. Here's my, okay. So very briefly, this is our agenda for the next 2 days, where I've broken it up into 2 sections. Today, we're going to get into introduction, observation, and development, and we're going to start our environment piece. And then the environment piece is pretty significant. So I split it up over 2 days. We're going to do more of that tomorrow. And then we're also going to go into discipline and limit setting tomorrow. It's going to be a nice one. So today we're really going to jump into Dr. Montessori and Magda Gerber. I'm not a RIE expert, but we cover some of that through the infant toddler Montessori, and I'll explain to you why. We're going to talk about the Montessori method. We're going to talk about the beginnings of language, and that's a piece that's just going to keep coming back to us throughout this lecture. And then we're going to get into our observation, practice, and we're going to start the environment. And tomorrow, we're going to go specifically into the 5 areas of the Montessori environment. We're going to do a room-by-room guide together, and we're going to do an environmental design, which I think will be really fun with all the spaces that you guys have provided. And if you haven't sent a picture and you have an environment for your infant or toddler right now and you still want to send it in, I think you can still do that. We're going to do that tomorrow, so you still have time. And then we're also going to do discipline and limit setting. So here are my goals for you. I want this to be an introduction. If you already know about Montessori, hopefully this will be inspiring for you. I want it to be information sharing, and it's really going to be a place to start. We're not going to be able to get into all of it. I want to provide you with resources so that if you find something that sounds really interesting and you want to jump down a rabbit hole, you can do that. And I'm going to send you some links at the end of this. So you don't have to write everything down, but you'll have some of the resources that I've used to pull this together for you. Okay, so this is me. That's my child there in the pink shirt sitting across from me. And this is a little friend who I've been hanging out with in my lap. I did my Montessori training in 2016. I am a certified pediatric massage therapist. I bring that up because a huge piece of this work in Montessori is about really learning subtle communication from infants and children. And a big part of that practice for me came through my pediatric massage work that I did. So I'm just gonna put that in there, and you can go, if that interests you, you can go kind of check that out. Email me, I have a great trainer for you if you want to jump down that rabbit hole. I've also worked as a birth doula. I'm a certified yoga teacher and certified to teach children with special needs. And I'm 20 years in the childcare, both home and childcare center industry. And my pronouns are she, they. So this I found the other day and I thought it was great. This was literally from when I was 6 years old. I don't think I knew what a nanny was, but like I knew what I wanted to be, which is very funny that it actually came to pass. So here we are. I also, just to give you a little background about why I'm here, I was raised in a home that was safe and stable, that there was a lot of trauma from the generation before. So my parents were raised in homes that would probably be considered abusive homes by today's standards. And so a lot of that came down through the generation. And so I think I'm here because Montessori is a peace education, and it's a beautiful, beautiful practice. And it also helps to stop that cycle. So I think that's why I'm here on a very personal level. And also, I just can't get away from children. I nannied in, let's see, Manhattan and Chicago and Boston for a few years. I lived in Florida for a year. I love to travel, so I just sort of took jobs wherever I could. I'm still regretting the job I didn't take in Brazil that one year, but that's okay. I think, so I'm here because I want to understand and respect children, that they have something to teach me. Every child that I meet has something to teach me. I think in terms of empathy, I want to be able to provide a very deep sense of empathy. And I want to grow that empathy in myself. And I also want to be able to share that perspective with others, because I think that we can really have a big impact when we do that. I think trust is a big one, learning to trust toddlers, especially, right? Like we're like, you're going to drop that and it's going to make a huge mess. And like when we think that, like it may or may not happen. And the reality is, if we can say, I trust that you're going to do your best, right? That makes a big difference in someone's world when we can do that. And observation, this beautiful, meditative, awesome practice of observation that we're going to learn all about, is one of my great loves. And I think when we combine all those things, we really give a voice to those who don't have a voice yet for themselves. And we can have a big impact on this stage of life and on their future when we can pull all these elements together. So just a couple of other notes before we begin. This is by no means a complete picture of child rearing practices. I am a white woman. These educators are white, Western-born women. This is going to forever limit my understanding of the big picture, and it's gonna, this is a limited perspective. So just take everything with a grain of salt. Take what works for you and leave the rest. And if you have some other cultural perspectives that you've been exposed to or you've grown up with, I would love to hear about them. If you have excellent books for me to read, send them my way. I always want to know. I'm working on that education myself right now. So, and then even within the Montessori sphere, this is not going to be a complete picture. We're going to do the best we can with the time we have. We're going to talk mostly about typically developing children. If you have other children that you want to talk about, email me. I have spent a great deal of time with children with alternative learning needs, both physical and cognitive. So reach out to me. Let's talk. I want to hear, because I've made Montessori environments for lots and lots and lots of different kiddos. So we can do that. I default to they, them, their pronouns for others, and also when generalizing about a child of any gender that I don't know. I started working for a family about 6 years ago who wanted to do this for their twins, and it just felt like home and it stuck. And so that's where we're at. We can do a whole other class on that. But for now, I just want you to know that when I use they, it's not necessarily plural. Okay, so let's jump in. Here's Dr. Montessori, and here's Magda Gerber. Is everybody doing okay? I feel like I'm talking fast, but I want to get to the good stuff. So it's not true, says Dr. Montessori, that I invented what is called the Montessori method. I have studied the child. I have taken what the child has given me and expressed it. And that is what is called the Montessori method. So she wrote a book with a really long title. It's called, let's see, I have it here, Methods of Scientific Pedagogy as Applied to Child Education in the Children's Houses. So when this was sent to America from Italy, where she was from, they were like, that's too long. We're just going to call it the Montessori method. It's fine. So she didn't invent this name herself. It was called after her. So I think it's important for context to understand a little bit about these people who we're going to be talking about in terms of the time frame that we're talking about. So she was born and lived around the turn of the last century in Italy. She was the first female doctor in Italy. There's a cool story that it was in considered inappropriate for her to do her cadaver lab in medical school with the men in her cohort. So she had to go like at night all alone to do her cadaver studies, which is totally wild to me and very cool, and shows her dedication, I think, to her studies. She had a child, so this is valuable information, but she was unwed. So she was pressured to give her child up at birth, and she didn't get him back until I think he was about 3 years old. So she created these practices in 3-year groupings. And she started with the 3 to 6 group, and then went up to 6 to 9 and 9 to 12, and so on, all the way up to age 24. And then at the very end of her life, she came back into the 0 to 3. So it's an incomplete set of information that we have for the 0 to 3 age. And the idea that some people have is that she did that because it was too painful for her to revisit that time of life, because she didn't have her own child during that time. So this is when we use some of Magda Gerber's practices, because they do align pretty well with Dr. Montessori's practices. So she was also in India for several years, and she had developed some of her schools there. So she does have that cultural exposure to somewhere other than Italy. So a little bit about Magda Gerber, really briefly. She's great. She says, childhood is not a race to see how quickly a child can read, write, and count. It is a small window of time to learn and develop at the pace that is right for each individual child. Earlier is not better. And I know that Adventure Nannies just hosted a RIE course. We're not going to do a lot on RIE. I'm also not certified in RIE, so I can't tell you a lot, but I can just tell you what I know through self-study. And this is right from the RIE organization website, just so you have a little background. So she lived a little later than Dr. Montessori. She was born in Hungary, and she studied and worked with Emmy Pickler, who's a very cool child development person. I haven't found a lot of her works translated to English. So if you have a good book to share with me, tell me, because I want to read more about Emmy Pickler too. She developed RIE. She said that the infant is a complete, if immature, human being with a self-initiating agenda to discover the world and us with an almost scientific approach. What infants need is the opportunity and time to take in and figure out the world around them. So she's really about slowing things down, which I think is even more valuable and practical in the world that we live in now, to remind us to slow down. So she says, observe more, do less, enjoy more. Wait, wait, wait. This is one that just constantly comes back to me when I'm in my practice. Do we all know this, that it takes infants 7 to 10 seconds, or toddlers 7 to 10 seconds to process our request? And then beyond that, like, potentially they may still not be able to do the thing that we're asking, but we just need to give them the time. Earlier is not better. I love this one. Having respect for the world is when you allow people to be what they are. So this is a community concept. Quality. And then, so her basic theories are based in respect, deep relationship, observation, patience. Humans are whole from day one, quality over quantity, and independence. Okay, so I just want to catch up with my notes here. So let's get into the Montessori method. We're first going to talk about the qualities of an educator. When we do our Montessori training, right? So I'm specifically trained in 0 to 3. So for those of you who have asked for information for older children, I would love to give that to you. I'm not trained in that. We can talk a little bit about it. But really the 0 to 3 training is where I'm at. And I don't know of a home environment course actually for 3 to 6. There's a lot more classroom materials that are very, very specific. So if you find that course, tell me, I want to know. Okay, so we spend a lot of time in our coursework learning about what the qualities of an educator are. And so, for example, in my old school, our director of education used to tell me all the time, Katie, you really need to smile more. So my face, my concentrated face, I don't know if you can see my face, you can just see the screen, but I have like a very serious, concentrated face. So when I'm concentrating, I'm not smiling. And my director would say to me, if you don't smile, the children aren't going to like you. So we would have meetings upon meetings about how we present ourselves in the classroom. So this is a really important piece of what we're doing. So the first thing we think about is sitting on our hands. So when we present a work to a child, and this is an older child in a 3 to 6 classroom, we sometimes literally have to sit on our hands because they'll do things their own way and we just can't control it. And Montessorians, sometimes we really want to. So we have to practice not correcting. Once we give the presentation, which I will show you, you're going to see lots of these. We have to put our hands behind our back or in our lap and just wait and allow the child to experience this. So for example, any sort of sweeping, pouring, dressing, you can think of a toddler doing this stuff. They're not going to do it right. Like they're going to put their pants on their head and try to find the head hole when there isn't one. And we just have to sit back and wait and let them experience this moment. Sweeping, they're not going to sweep effectively. That's okay. They're doing the process. They're doing the muscle movements. That's the value in that. So in this book is called The Absorbent Mind. Anytime you see TAM, that's the absorbent mind. That's sort of like her Bible. It's a great one. That's the 0 to 6. A lot of that is 0 to 3. So she says, praise, help, or even a look may be enough to interrupt the child. Sorry. Or destroy the activity. The great principle which brings success to the teacher is this: as soon as concentration has begun, act as if the child does not exist. We're going to talk more about this later. So then also in Montessori, we don't call ourselves teachers, we call ourselves guides. So we will set up the home environment or classroom, wherever you are, and we prepare it for the child, and then we guide them where they need it. We're watching to see what they need, and then we're going to provide that. That's going to be our feedback for what needs to come into the environment. So the idea of teacher, as in like I have something to teach to someone else, as opposed to I'm here to provide the environment for you and guide you where you need it. So it's just a little semantics, it's different. So this one I love. There is great honor in being an interpreter for infants and toddlers. Maybe you feel this. Maybe that's partly why you're here. I think when we start to live very deeply in this trusting, empathetic relationship with infants and toddlers, we become this interpreter, which is a really powerful and special role to be in. So she says the child's one hope lies in the interpreter. Here is someone who will unlock the garden of discovery to which the world has shut the door. The child's helper is admitted to an intimacy which exceeds affection because help is a greater gift than consolation. So when she says the world has shut the door, this is a context, time context piece we have to remember, right? Like I think this was in a time when children were seen and not heard. And so I think it's still true that a lot of people assume that children aren't paying attention or they don't know or they don't understand, and we can be that, that interpreter for them. And then also a mindfulness practice is really, really valuable as we're doing this. You know, I think it's important to be able to model and exhibit this authentic patience. So whatever that is for you, I love breath work. I love yoga. If it's painting or gardening or whatever it is where you find yourself in that flow and you find yourself in that peaceful state, that's where we need to find ourselves, and we need to really have a mindfulness practice. I love Montessori observation. Maybe I mentioned it. And part of that observation practice for me is a mindfulness practice, because we have to be really, really present in that practice. So it's really an act of presence, and it's a lovely gift. And being peaceful and calm. So I'm not a naturally peaceful person. If you're not, you can do this too. It's all a practice. It's all learning. Okay, so these are the basic tenets of Montessori. We're going to go through each one of these individually. And we're going to start with care of self, care of others, and care of the environment. So care of self. So care of self means practical life. So that's anything around the house that a child would do for themselves, like brushing their hair, brushing their teeth, getting themselves a glass of water, putting on their shoes, sweeping, anything in the kitchen, really, anything that has to do with dressing, anything like that. So we want to set the environment up for independence for our children so that they can practice this care of self. So right now on my shelf, I have a 13-month-old here at home, and we have a basket of shoes that they don't really wear outside, but we just have it on the shelf because they like practicing putting the shoes on their feet, and they can just get them sort of like on their toes at this moment. But it's for practice. Care of others. So this is our peace education starting from a very young age. So this is my friend Zyler on the left in the red shirt. And this is my oldest child, Zavi, who's now 5. And Zyler is putting sunscreen on Zavi. So any little practices that they can really do for themselves is a lovely gift. It builds confidence. It builds empathy. And Dr. Montessori says, we shall walk together on this path of life, for all things are part of the universe and are connected with each other to form one whole unity. And so that brings us to the care of the environment. So this means anything within our home environment, like within the home, if you have a yard. It also means your neighborhood, your community, your social community, and it's also the world at large. So taking care of each other. Okay, follow the child. I had a neighbor ask me, what do you mean follow the child? Like, what is that? Like literally, like you want me to like follow behind the child and say, no, I don't want to. Well, but then I was thinking about it and I was like, well, you could actually, and it might be really an interesting study for the day if you wanted to do that and see where they went. But what it means is we're observing the child and we are going to provide what the child needs in the moment. So we need to take our own agenda out of the way, right? So in this moment, this is my friend Nora, and Nora was peacefully looking at a book on the floor. And I look at this picture now and I think, oh, I just want to go over there and sit next to Nora and I want to read the book and I want to cuddle with Nora and I want to talk to Nora. And the reality is that whatever Nora's doing, Nora's having a moment and Nora's experiencing this book the way that Nora needs to experience it and is not asking for my support. And that's great, right? Because we all want our children to be able to independently play and independently spend time by themselves. And so I had to stay back and wait. And I'm sure that there was some point when Nora, reached out and asked for my help. And I probably went over and sat down and read the book to Nora. This was several years ago, so I don't remember now. But the concept is to let the child dictate what the situation needs so that we're following the child in that moment. So let's talk about sensitive periods. We're going to spend a lot of time on sensitive periods later today during observation. But the concept is that Maria Montessori created this idea. This is not her chart. There's lots of different charts of this. But the idea is that children go into a period of deep, deep focus while they're learning something. So kind of the way to read this chart is if you look down about 8 o'clock, if you're looking at a clock face, it says age 0. And then you can follow that orange line up where it says movement and goes all the way around to age, what is that, 7 at the bottom? I can't quite see it. So the idea is that children could potentially be in a sensitive period for movement from age 0 all the way through that 6th year of life, 7th year of life, I guess. And so it goes like this. We're going to talk a lot about these sensitive periods. This is from Age of Montessori. This is a great organization. Check them out. They're going to be in your resource list. This is another one from the Kavanaugh Report, also a great resource. They send out newsletters to your email inbox, which are fun. And this is a different illustration of the same thing. And there's no concrete understanding of exactly where these sensitive periods start and stop. So every chart is going to be a little different, but you can kind of get an idea of it. We're going to talk a lot more about sensitive periods. So let's talk about the prepared environment. So here's this concept that we set up our environment to support the child and what the child needs. And what we want to do, and it's okay if you don't know exactly what the developmentally appropriate thing is that the child needs in this moment or how to observe. We're going to talk about all of that. We're going to get there. And I can't teach you all of it today, but I'm going to teach you how to find the information and I'm going to give you ways to practice it. So one of the big parts of a Montessori environment is the concept of control of error. So what we want to do is we want to provide activities in the environment that are self-correcting. So you can see Zavi here, again, this is my eldest. You're going to see a lot of pictures of my children because I am the least inhibited about taking photos of them. I hope you like them. So Zavi is looking at this knob cylinders. This is a smaller one for a toddler classroom. There's a larger version of this for the 3 to 6 classroom. This is a classic Montessori activity. But all these cylinders, and they're knobbed, meaning they have the little piece on top that you can use your pincer grasp to pull them out of the hole and put them back in. Zavi's, each one fits into the hole exactly so. And Zavi's going to discover soon after this photo is taken that Zavi has the one right now in the wrong hole. So I never have to sit down and say to Zavi, oh, put this here, put that there, move this here. This is self-correcting. Zavi can do this independently. They're not all going to fit unless they're in the right spot. This is a nice activity for toddlers. So we promote independence through this, and then also through self-choice. So by having things on an open shelf, you can see Zavi's kind of torn through. This is an old classroom we were in. Zavi's kind of torn through this classroom right now. So there's a lot of work on the floor, but you can see that all the open shelves are here. This is a big piece, is these open shelves and being able to see what's available. And they're pretty sparse. You can see there's not a lot of things, which is nice because it's easy cleanup for us, right? At the end of the day. So there is this RIE concept, maybe you know it, of a yes space. Montessori is a little different. There are some similarities. So my understanding of a yes space is that we're going to make a gated off area usually for the child where everything that they can think of to do within reason is a go. Yes, go for it. Montessori is a little different in that we would prep the environment. So RIE might say, like, you can't, no kitchen stuff, no kitchen stuff. There's too much going on. There's too many knives. There's too many opportunities for children to break stuff. We just can't, you can't do a real kitchen opportunity for RIE. But in Montessori, we would say, yes, we are going to prep the environment so that it's ready for the child. So as you're prepping your environment and you're supporting families through how they want to manage their home and set up their home, you can decide, does a yes space work for you? Or, you know, because there's different kinds of independence. They can do more in the moment in a yes space. They can do more in the community, in the home with a Montessori space. So neither one is right or wrong. It's up to what feels good and what costs all of you the least amount of emotional energy. So we want the environment to be challenging, but not frustrating. That's key. Learning comes from struggle, right? This is really valuable. Challenge is valuable, but if it's frustrating, we need to change something out of the environment and try it again later, or represent the lesson perhaps. And we want community-based work. So this is our practical life. So this is going to be the sweeping and the dishwashing and all the things that make children feel that they are part of the environment in which we all live. They see us doing these things, that they also want to do these things. Also, I have, my two children are home right now because it's a snowy day. Everybody's inside and you're going to hear them in the background. My toddler is getting ready for a nap, so I hear them crying right now. And if you're hearing that, it's me. I apologize. Okay, so concrete to abstract is a concept that's fun. This is really cool. This is a 3 to 6 work in a Montessori classroom, and it's not going to apply to us, but I do want to show it to you because I think it really illustrates the concept of concrete to abstract. So these are the golden beads. So in the top right, you can see there's these single beads. This represents 1. This is an early math work. So when you would hold 1 bead in your hand, right, below that is the tens bar, you would then hold the tens bar in your hand, and you would feel that 10 feels like more than 1. And then all the way to the left of the screen is the thousands cube. So there's 1,000 beads in that cube. So when you hold that in one hand, you feel that 1,000 is greater than 1. And this is a major concept of Montessori, is that you never wrap your brain around something until you wrap your hands around something. So there's tactile opportunities everywhere all the time. So this is one in the 3 to 6 classroom. What does this look like in an infant and toddler environment? To me, I love it in the kitchen. We are in the kitchen all the time. Where do brownies come from? What are they? They are the ingredients that make up the brownies, right? They are the flour and the sugar and the chocolate. Hand self-feeding is a really concrete way to understand food, feeding your own self with your own hands. What is inside of a squash? What does that look like? So, okay, so in terms of concrete to abstract, fantasy, Dr. Montessori considers fantasy to be an obstacle to the development of the spirit. And the reason for this is that there's no control of error. There's no real materials, and this is a distraction from reality. So she said that children don't understand the difference between reality and fantasy until the age of 6. So anything before that can be confusing, and it can distract from the work that their brains and their bodies really need to be doing. This is something, if you work in an environment with young toddlers, maybe, I don't know, in my experience, this is the hardest one to wrap my head around. Children naturally go into fantasy play. And we talk about this at conferences and in meetings, and it's all the time. How can we not do fantasy? How can we avoid fantasy? So there's no dress up in our classroom environment, right? Again, I'm going to share some information with you from a classroom, also from home environments. I think it's valuable to understand what happens in the classroom because Montessori originally was designed for a classroom environment, and it started with that 3 to 6 age group. So I'm going to talk to you about both. I know you're working in homes. I think that's great. And let's bring it. I just want to give you the concept of what happens in the classroom. I think it's a little more strict in the classroom than at home. At least that's how it is in my world. I'm much more strict in a Montessori classroom than I am in a Montessori home environment. There's no dress up area. We use real functional materials. So the kitchen, so there's going to be no play kitchen. Now I have a mud kitchen in my backyard. It's like we have a real sink. I bought a sink for $5 at a secondhand store, and we have like a potato masher and a whisk. I don't know. But we're not really making anything. I don't know what she would say about that. Probably that's fantasy because we're encouraging fantasy play. So we want to answer the questions truthfully. So if there's a thunderstorm outside, like I'm not going to say like, that's the giants in the sky that are pounding their feet because they're having a tantrum or whatever. I'm going to say it's this, hot temperature system and the cold weather system coming together, and it's creating electricity and energy. And I don't really know what a thunderstorm is. I guess maybe I should study that before I give that as an example. Hopefully no one will ask me that today. But anyways, we want to give the truthful answers. And so if we do fantasy, this is the thing that we have decided on, as at least in my professional circles, when we have fantasy, it's child-led. So if a child says to me, if someone has a tea set in their workspace, I am not going to say, would you like to have a tea party with me? Would you like to sit down and we can do, I'm not going to decide that for the child. I might say, would you like to have a cup of tea? We could go to the kitchen and I could show you how to fill the kettle, and we could get some teacups, and we could do the real thing. Again, I'm giving this information, do what feels good, leave the rest. So the Santa thing, what about Santa? What about magic? I think, my argument is, I think there's a lot of things that are magical in this world. I think bubbles are magic. I think birth is magic. I think science is magic. I think thunderstorms are magic. It all comes down to personal choice. You decide if you're into Santa, that's awesome. I fully support you and I am on board with you. But if you're not, there's another way, and you can do it without Santa too. And again, this is all, you can share all this information with your families. I want to just give you some rabbit holes, things to start thinking about. Okay, let's move on. We're getting down there with the tenets. So disorder to order. This is a fun one. So this concept is that children are born uncoordinated, but exploratory. And the Montessori environment provides materials that will train the muscles to become coordinated. And so the concept is that external order in the environment, so these things neatly on the shelves, will support the development of internal order. So when a child in their mind says, I got to do a puzzle, I got to get this puzzle work done today, my brain and body are telling me puzzle, they know they can always go to one area of the workspace and they can find a puzzle. It may not always be the same puzzle, but it's always going to be a puzzle. So that's that external order. So this nourishes the development of executive functioning skills. I think this is another reason why I'm here in Montessori. I don't have great executive functioning skills. Montessori provides excellent opportunities for executive functioning skill development. And that involves working memory, flexible thinking, and inhibitory control. We don't have a lot of time to get into that. That concept was new to me when I started my Montessori education. There are lots of books on it and websites. You can look that up and check it out, and tell me what you find, because I want to read books on it too. So the example I think of is when you're at Costco, and like everything's in the same place every time, and you can go into Costco and you know what you need, and you know that the cookies are over by the bakery aisle, and you know that the coffee's always in that one section, and the toilet paper is always in another section, or whatever grocery store you go to, it applies. Everything's always in the same place. So when you go in, you can get your work done and you can get out. You don't have to waste mental energy on looking for things. So similar concept. So from disorder to order. So this is a nice way to orient a puzzle on a shelf. If you can put the pieces in a basket to the left of the puzzle frame, then the child can create order from disorder. You have created disorder, controlled disorder in the environment, and they can create order from that. And we're always going left to right because we're thinking about early reading concepts, even from toddlerhood, very, very early on. So, and we're not going to have a lot of things in our environment like letters and numbers, and we're going to talk more about this, but we do have this left to right, and this is the English language. If you are practicing this in a language that doesn't go left to right, you may be doing this in a different order, something to consider. Okay, development of concentration. So this is the idea that all materials are designed to support independence and to help develop concentration. Children do this naturally. We just need to stay out of their way. This is a big part of learning this work, is I think, especially as nannies, like we do this because we love children and we love being near them. I don't know if you're like me. I'm a very snuggly person. I love finding, one of my children is very snuggly, one is not. But I need to really focus on backing up and saying, okay, you need to develop your concentration. I see that you're focused on something right now. I'm going to stand back and let you do this. And I'm just not going to get in the way. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm not even going to look at you. I'm just going to leave you be and probably observe you quietly and subtly from another part of the space. So I want to show you a video two videos actually, of fine motor development on concentration. So this is my child at 8 weeks old. This is Shiloh, my second child, who's now 13. Oh no, I'm sorry. This is the wrong one. Okay. No, this is Zavi again. This is Zavi around 14 months old. Here we go. So Zavi, this is a posting work. Posting is one of the first works that children will choose to do. So posting means putting things inside of things. This is when you need to lock your garbage when you're at this stage. My other child is at this stage right now, and we have so many toys that get thrown away every day. I have to fish through the trash. So Zavi is really focused on this. And then he starts to lose it. And he's like, well, I guess I'll do something else. And then he decides, nope, he's going to come back to it. And you can see, I always say Montessori, you can do on any budget. You can see that I have done this with no budget, this particular work. The hole is just a tiny bit bigger than the pom-poms. We want it to be really interesting and hold their attention. So this is a lot of what our observations look like. We're just watching. And you could see that if I said something to Zavi in this moment, he would have stopped what he was doing and looked at me. So we have to learn how to look for these moments when our children are doing them, and then how to really just stay out of their way. So then he gets distracted, or maybe he's just finished. And he moves on to some other work on the shelf. So then I want to show you an example of gross motor concentration development. And again, I want to show you these examples because I want you to be able to look for them with your children and your nanny children. So this is Zavi. We were at my stepmom's house, and Zavi started, we used to call them circuits. And we had woken up in the morning and Zavi was doing this circuit. And this was this repeated, it's a repeated action. So Zavi's really focused. So he's backing off the bed and he's going to walk around this chair and he's going to go tap that desk chair right there. And then he's going to come back around and he's going to step on a box. And he's going to tap his little feet on the box. Tap, 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 tap. He's doing a thing. And he had done this a few times before I started recording, of course. So I think we're just catching the last two. But this is repeated almost exactly through. So he's backing off the bed. Have you seen your nanny children doing this, or any children doing this ever? He's going to walk around the chair. He's going to tap on that desk chair. He's going to tap on that box. And there he goes. So he was doing this over and over and over and over again. So this is a concentrated action, right? So when we see this, we just got to stay out of their way. You can start to look for these things in your children, and I promise you, you'll find them. My children are very special, but they're not That's special. Everyone does this. Okay. So that's our tenets of Montessori. I think that's a good introduction. There's a lot more. Again, this isn't going to be um, a complete picture, but this will give you a start. Okay. So let's start talking about language. Language is a huge piece of this practice, and it comes back again and again and again. I love this quote. To understand the baby's mind, it is absolutely essential to take the path of observation and discovery. This is by no means easy. For our knowledge of baby talk, and by baby talk, she means our understanding of what babies are saying to us, is seldom sufficiently good, or we may fail to grasp the special implications which the child wants us to attach to their words. How we long for an interpreter to tell us their meaning. I have worked for a long time on this myself, trying to make myself into the child's interpreter. And I have noted with surprise how if you try to do this for them, they come running to look for you, as if understanding that here is someone who can help them. And this is a really special bond that we get to have with our children and that we get to offer for them. And I think, I don't know how you feel about using language of love for your nanny children. I don't necessarily feel comfortable saying I love you to a child, but who's not my own. But I do feel this very deep sense of connection when we can attain this level of communication. And I think that the child feels that too. And I think that's a really special gift. So a little bit about language. This may be a review for some of you, but I think it's important to go over. So receptive versus expressive language. So receptive is listening and understanding, anything that's listening and understanding. Expressive is all verbal and nonverbal intentional communication. They both begin at birth. Receptive can be difficult to see happening because if you say to a toddler, can you put this cup on the table? And the toddler doesn't do it, like you don't know if they've understood you. You may, if you know them well enough and you know the look in their eye, you may know that. But expressive, it can be easier if you know what to look for, or if the child is older, or if you're very attuned to the young baby. I worked with a mom with a 4-month-old who said, I know my child is telling me when they're going to poop, and I take their diaper off and I put them over the potty. They were doing elimination communication. So if you know what to look for, expressive can be easier to see. So examples are, receptive would be understanding a question and following a direction, looking in the direction of an object or a person when their name is spoken. So if I were to say to my child, where's Papa? And my child looked at their dad. Expressive is going to be speaking and verbally expressing not wants and needs, and then shaking their head yes and no. So for language, we're going to go through each of these two because I feel like it's valuable. Speak slowly. Do you remember when you were learning a new language? Did you learn a new language in school or at any point in your life? Did you have to learn a new language from the one you were originally speaking? Like it's hard to do. If someone starts speaking really fast in another language, it's hard to understand. So if we can speak slowly and consider our eye level. So this child in my lap here is Mia. Mia was a dual language learner, English and Hebrew. And look how Mia's looking at my eyes and my face while I'm reading the book. Mia's not looking at the book, which I think is such a beautiful, powerful learning moment. Mia just got her driver's license. Use truthful and appropriate and correct language. So we can always tell an infant what's going to happen before we do it. I'm going to pick you up. And then I would even say 1, 2, 3, up. So I give them a chance to process. I'm going to pick you up. This is about consent. This is about language development. This is about independence and autonomy. All of these things of saying, I'm going to do to you. If I have to do something to you, or if we're going to do it together, I'm going to let you know before we do it. So every step of the way. Parallel talk. Oh, you're reaching for the bar. You're running fast. Or if it's a hard moment, I hear you. You don't want to wait. This is hard. It's hard to wait. Okay, so here's a little quiz. This is your first quiz. Do you know the difference between these animals? I don't know the Jeopardy tune. Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't. Here they are. These animals hunt very differently. They live in very different parts of the world. There are 3 very different animals. And when we can learn this stuff, right? Again, this is a rabbit hole you can nerd out on if you want to. I have an old coworker who knows every animal, how they hunt, where they live, what their prey is, what their home environment is, because she knows that it's important to the children. She works with toddlers. It's important to them. So she has learned this so that she can explain this to them. So again, things to think about and strive for. Also, in terms of language, here's a puppy, here's a dog. They're two different animals at two different stages of life. There's different word for them. We don't have to say doggy. I think a lot of times, like we think that children can't understand, but this is the absorbent mind, right? They're learning more now than they're ever going to learn again. And we can provide this language for them. So it's the same thing. You can call a cardinal a cardinal. That's great. Give them that language. It's rich. It's beautiful. They are ready for it. And then also, this is an important one. In terms of using correct language, we need to call a vulva a vulva. We need to call a scrotum a scrotum. It's important if I'm saying, I'm going to put cream on your vulva right now, or it looks like your scrotum is itching you. I'm going to use that language. It's important because they need to be able to learn it and use it back to us at some point when they need to. And it's really nice if you're working with a baby and you don't usually practice this. If you feel weird about it and you have some like shame that was given to you about this, you can start when they're really young, and it gets easier. As the more you practice, the easier it gets. Toileting functions, same thing. I'm not going to say, oh, you stink, your diaper stinks. I'm going to say, it seems like you have a poop in your diaper. Let's go change it. Because I want to provide dignity for for children, all children. Always dignity. Whatever option you choose the one with the most dignity. Be direct. Don't dumb it down. They are at learning words at an explosive rate. We can use that rich language. Also, watch for sarcasm and puns and exaggeration. They don't get it. So as much as we need to be able to interpret what they need, we are also the interpreter of the world to them. They're very, very literal people. And the most respectful option for them is to be able to just provide that correct language. And I'll tell you what, I'm a huge fan of puns. So this is a hard one for me. It takes practice. And every time I screw it up, I just say, oh, and then I just repeat it in the way that I wish I had said it first. And that's the way that I practice. That's how I fix my mistakes when I can. Don't underestimate the value of silence. Quality over quantity. We want to be thoughtful about when we're using verbal language. So, and we want to consider flow. So this is that concentration. If you see someone concentrating, you don't need to use any language. You can just leave them be. They've got it. Okay. So is it necessary? Is it kind and respectful? And is it true? So this is something I often think about. Again, this is like, we're going into nitty gritty here. So you're going to be in a home environment. There's going to be a lot of things going on. There's a lot of stimulation. There's sometimes a lot of people. And you can just think about this. This is just to give you something to think about. Does it add value to the moment? And if I'm really able to be in my practice, I will be able to think about this and say, do I need to say this? Does it add value? Or maybe I can just be quiet on this one. I talk a lot. Can you tell? I need to practice that one. So we're going to keep talking about the value of language throughout this course. It's just going to keep coming back. So I just want to do a little time check. Where are we? Oh, perfect timing. Okay. So does anybody have questions on this section so far? I want to come back out and see you. Can you see me?
I have a practical question.
Sure.
Are your slides going to be available so that we can refer our families back to them?
That's an adventure name. That's an Eleni question.
Okay. Because my family that does somewhat practice Montessori would get a lot of value out of them.
So if they're not available, I can tell you that you're going to have a huge resource list. And one of the things that I want to do, and the next thing that we're going to talk about is observation. And after that, we're going to go into a breakout room and talk about communication with families and how to share this information. But I have a really big, extensive resource list for you of ways that you guys can start practicing the work. There's videos to watch, there's books to read, there's websites, there's Instagram accounts, there's all kinds of things that you can start looking into so that you can keep going with this. And there's going to be shareable stuff in there that people have put, it might be like, it's hard to understand what it is if I haven't explained it. Whereas this article is a very complete explanation and it's short and sweet and you can just share it with them. So if they're not available, that's an option.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Okay. Who's that? I can't see your face. Where are you?
Trey.
Hi, I'm Katie. Oh, hi, Trey.
Nice to talk to you. My question is more about like culturally, how often, so one of the issues that I think I have sometimes is that parents are down and they're like in and they're like, yes, we're going to let them lead the way and we're going to give them their space to do their thing. It's the grandparents that are more like, no, he's going to hurt himself. He's going to do this. He's going to do. How do you respectfully teach kids as well as yourself to address those concerns, but still giving them their independence, if that makes any sense? Like when your son was getting off of the bed and going to the chair and then going back and climbing back up, if that was his grandmother who's like, no, I'm going to pick him up. And it's like, how do you teach him, or how do you respectfully teach them? We're encouraging independence. You know, he might fall, but it's okay.
Yeah. So are you a polite person?
I vary.
I'll tell you that my family,
I could be more polite, I think, sometimes. Like,
well, I am not. I'll tell you that I am not a polite person. My family gets very upset with me because I am very outspoken about this stuff. Maybe you've noticed. I think it depends. So I guess my question to you would be,
and I don't have kids, so any of my experience is all other people's children. I think that's the part that makes it, I'm trying to be professional and still.
Okay, so I think, and this is going to be a hard thing because once you have this information, you can't unsee it, right? Like and you're going to see it everywhere that people are doing things differently and you're going to go, oh, and that's okay. That's okay, right? Because there's so many different ways of doing things. This is not necessarily the right way. So I'm encouraging you, don't just learn Montessori, go learn it all. Right. And base it in respect. And I think that my question would be my answer is going to be different based on whether or not the child is living with the grandparents or how much the child is seeing the grandparents. So if the child's seeing the grandparents like once a month or once a week or whatever it is, for me, I feel like let's just let it go. They're going to have a relationship with those grandparents, and we're going to be a bigger influence on our children than that. And that's okay. It's okay if they do things differently. It's okay. And I think that our children will learn that different people have different expectations of them. If the grandparents are 5 days a week childcare, you're going to have an education conversation with those grandparents about, let's do this together. Here's something that we're really interested in learning more about. We'd love to do this journey together. And if you're the nanny in a home where the grandparents live there, it may be that they become part of that parent education for you. And then when they start to see the outcomes with the children, where the children are taking more risks, but they're doing it with being very thoughtful about it, that's going to make a change. And they're going to start to see the value of the practice when it starts to pay off with the children.
Thank you.
Does that help? Okay, cool. Any other questions? And then I want to invite you all to do a little bio break before we move into our observations. If you want to go get a drink of water or go to the bathroom or anything.
I have a question.
Hi, Cameron.
Hi. So I don't know if this might apply to other people right now. I watch 2 twin 15-month-olds and then a 5-year-old who's home doing Zoom kindergarten. And dad is home right now, really like since COVID has happened. And we're all kind of on the same page of how we want to do things, but like in the heat of the moment a lot. Dad kind of, I think he sees like one of the kids kind of doing something they're not supposed to do. And even though really that's kind of my area that I should be in control of, he kind of, I think, wants to like step in and help me out in a way, but it almost like undermines. But then as we talk about it later, he's kind of back on the same page of like, okay, yeah, I understand that, you know, they need to do this themselves or whatnot. Is that just something that you kind of have to work around, is like that kind of, I don't know if that's really making sense.
Yeah, I think so. And we can dive more into this in our breakout room and then also in our limit setting practice. But it's going to be good to be versed in how to communicate with parents around this stuff. And I think sometimes parents see us with 3 children on our hands and they think, oh, they probably need a hand. Like if I were in that situation, I would be overwhelmed and I would need a hand. I was working in a nanny share with 3 children. And whenever we would get ready to go outside, 3 toddlers, someone was inevitably crying. Like it just happens. It's a transition. And I'm there with them and I'm saying, like, I see you and I hear you and this is hard. And we're going to get through this. And then we're going to get outside and we're going to go play in the snow, but in the meantime, someone's crying. So the dad was a work from home and he would come over and say, oh, do you need help? And oh, let me see if someone's crying. And so we had a conversation where I just said, waiting is practice. Like it takes practice to learn to wait. And if you are really struggling with hearing them cry, it's okay to come help, but I want you to know that this is my job and I'm very practiced at it. And I am not afraid of being in a space with a child who's crying. It's okay with me. So it may just be, communication around, like, he may be worried about you not being able to handle it because crying for him is really takes a toll on him. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think it's going to be about definitely communication. And we're going to talk more about that.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. Should we do do you guys want to turn off your videos and do a dance? Or maybe you want to keep your videos on and do a dance? I don't know, whatever you're into. If you want to go shake your butt a little bit, get a drink of water and then come back in 5 minutes. Does that sound good? Okay, cool. And then we'll go into observation. Can you guys see my screen? Yeah? Okay, cool. Okay, so let's go into observation. I think we're going to get started and people will join us as they come back. So we're going to talk about observation, why it's valuable. We're going to talk about development through the sensitive periods. That's that round chart that you saw before. And we're going to talk about examples and practice. We're going to practice. Okay. So this is a picture from Maria Montessori's children's house in Italy. And you can see the guide there in about the middle of the screen, in the back of the classroom, sitting at a table. They're practicing sitting on their hands. Not really sitting on their hands, but they are watching a child do a work. And this is a classroom example. This happens in a classroom and it will happen in an infant classroom with 7 infants. It will happen in a toddler classroom with 14 toddlers, not as often, but it does happen. And when it does, it is totally magical when children are all doing their own work and you can just sit there and realize that you don't need to do anything. So one of the nice things about Montessori is that we are encouraged to sit down. So if my boss comes walking by the classroom door and sees that I am sitting in a chair and watching 14 children, my boss is like, good job, you did it, because you don't have to be up doing stuff right now. You have prepared this classroom in a way that you can now watch the children work. And that's always the goal. So that's when we do our observation. But we're always kind of doing it. So Dr. Montessori says the observation of the way in which the children pass from the first disordered movements to those which are spontaneous and ordered. Remember that concept, disordered to order. This is the book of the teacher. This is the book which must inspire their actions. So this is especially inspiring to watch for toddlers, but it continues throughout the entire learning process, and probably still as adults when we learn this, right? We take this concept that we don't understand, and then we bring it into focus and we start to learn about it. We can order it in our brains. So the keys to observation: non-judgment. This is a big one. We're not making judgments. We're not making conclusions. We're not drawing conclusions. We're just gonna be looking to see what we see. Presence. So this means the phone thing, it's gotta go. We have to put our phones down. We can't be doing anything else. We can't be having a conversation even. You may find yourself observing while you're having a conversation with someone. I end up doing that where I'm sort of side talking to someone and I'm not meant to be observing, but I'm always kind of looking. So when you get there, that's fun too. And it's a real-time account. So we're going to start with an example. This is a cool one. This is the one I thought we were going to watch before because I was so excited about it. I was jumping ahead. So you remember the concept of concrete to abstract, the relationship of the hand to the brain to the environment, that feedback loop. That was those golden beads that we saw. We saw the singles and the tens bar and the hundreds and then the thousands cube that's in the older classroom when we talked about how does that translate. So this concept is She says, after much observation, oh, sorry, this is from a book called Montessori from the Start. This is going to be on your resource list. Highly recommend. It's all about building a home environment. This is a good one. And they say, after much observation and study, Dr. Montessori began gradually to understand how, as human beings, we develop our intelligence by learning through our 5 senses, and particularly through the relationship between the hand and the brain. In recognition of the building of intelligence of this feedback loop of information from the hand to the brain and back again, Montessori stated that nothing should be given to the brain that is not first given to the hand. By this, she meant that abstract ideas and information of every possible kind should be given to the young child first in concrete form to be held, discovered, and explored. So one of the things that we talk about a lot in our infant and toddler training is the concept of the development of the hand. And you see a little baby go from this to a toddler being able to do this, a pincer grasp. This is a big change, right? And eventually to holding a pencil. This is a big, big change. So, and it happens in a very short amount of time. So this is the development of the hand, and a lot of the work that we provide on the shelves has to do with this. So this is my child at approximately 8 weeks old. And I'm just going to jump in. I saw this happening and I stopped, and you might hear sounds in the background. It's breakfast time at my house when we were filming this. So you can see that look of concentration, right? This is what you start to look for. Shiloh is very deeply thinking about organizing those muscles. Shiloh really wants to hit that cow. And there's a little success. Okay, so this is Shiloh 24 hours later. After several naps and a big sleep, potentially a big sleep. I don't think Shiloh is sleeping very much at that point. Okay, here we go. Don't get distracted by the blanket. That's too many blankets. Please use safe sleeping practices for your baby. It was December and it was cold and I was right there. So you can see that hand to cow contact. Oh, and there we go. See, I didn't prepare the environment for Shiloh. I didn't set them up for success. Their blanket was in their way. And my older child is telling me, don't use your phone at the table. That's a family rule. So you can see that success rate over 24 hours is huge. And I share this video for 2 reasons. Number one, like totally mind blowing that an infant can change this much, right? From looking and focusing and thinking about the act to then making it happen. It's incredible. And if I had not slowed down to look for this, I would not have seen it. So this is where the value is in really pausing. So it says creative observation of your child is essential from birth onward. This is the only way to discover who your unique child is and how to adjust yourself to their uniqueness. You have to know your child at the deepest level in order to make the right moves with them, ones that will help and support but not interfere in both play and work. So this is why we do our observations. Oh, that's from Montessori from the Start. Sorry. So the purpose, we want to learn about the child, right? We want to know what sensitive period are they satisfying or isolating. You're going to know what those are. What are they enjoying most in this moment? These are the questions that you're going to be asking yourself as you start to observe your children on Monday or whenever you go back to work this week. What is their focus? What are they looking at? What are they thinking about? What are they concentrating on? For Shiloh, it was the flying cow. What challenges are they choosing? What natural obstacles are there in the way of their work? That blanket was an obstacle to Shiloh. Maybe you have a dog bed with, in front of the work shelf and you didn't realize it, and you have a dog in your house or in your employer's house that maybe is not very friendly. You need to move that dog bed. Maybe they're wearing footy pajamas and the child can't climb on the thing that they want because the footy pajamas are getting in their way. So, and then perhaps most importantly, we want to learn empathy, understanding, and respect in ourselves for the child. And we can do that by watching and really gaining an understanding of their inner world and what it is that they're experiencing moment to moment. So we also do it because we want to learn about ourselves. We want to observe, we're going to observe our own selves as we do this. Another big part of my work when I'm in the classroom is observing my co-teacher. And my co-teacher observing me, and our director of education coming in, and she will observe us, once a week. So this feels like a lot to do if you're not accustomed to being watched while you're working. It can feel weird to start, but it is a powerful practice because you can learn a lot about yourself in this moment. You can learn about, and you might say, oh, I noticed that you helped Ailey put the ball in the hole, and it seemed like Ailey was doing it. I was just wondering why you wanted to help in that moment. And you'll learn something about your colleague, and they might say, oh, well, I noticed that their hand was stuck in their sleeve, or whatever it is. Or they might say, oh, I was tired today and I wasn't thinking about my practice, whatever it was. So I highly, highly recommend that you set up these observation practices with your nanny family, if they're willing, if they're going to take the time to do it. You can also do professional observations. If you are friends with a nanny in your area, and you can say maybe once a month, you go into their environment and you observe them for an hour, and you don't talk and you don't chat, and you can't really have, it's hard because you can't really have a conversation, but you would do these observations and then get together again afterwards and discuss what you saw in the environment with each other, how you were responding. I highly recommend these. They're very powerful, and there's a big learning experience from this. It may be hard now because of COVID. Maybe you can't go into each other's homes at this moment. That's okay. You can wait. Another thing I think is very valuable, when COVID is over, I don't think you can observe in schools right now, but we go as professionals, we go into Montessori schools, and they expect that people will come in to observe. There's an observation chair in every classroom. So you can call up your local Montessori school if there's an infant or toddler program and say, hey, I'm a nanny, but I'm really interested in the Montessori method, and I'd love to come observe in your school for a day. Can I do that? Can I come to your infant room and just sit? And they will probably say yes, as long as COVID is done and we're done with that. So find that, check that out. So Magda Gerber has a lovely, lovely, lovely bit on observation. She really nailed it. I'm basically paraphrasing from Your Self-Confident Baby. It's a great book. If you don't have it, you can get it at your library. You can probably find it used. It's pretty cheap and it's worth having. And it's a great one to share with families because you can just kind of leaf through it and find the page that you're interested in. So the key to respect is sensitive observation of your child, she says. So respect is established by removing yourself a little, creating some distance between yourself and your child in order to see them with freshness and objectivity. So my own child was about 11 months old when my 5-year-old and I were playing Sternhalma. I think that's what it's called. It used to be called Chinese checkers. That is the incorrect word for it. It's called Sternhalma. Here we go. So they wanted to come over, and I had said to my child, Shiloh's awake, and they might, if you want to play this right now, they might come over. And my child said, okay, we were down with that. And they came over and they wanted to pick up the pieces. And they started to come towards the board, and I started to stop them. And I observed myself, and I said, why? What is it? I'm not really looking at this with fresh eyes. I need to wait and see, what does Shiloh really want to do? And so I backed off and I said, come join us. And Shiloh came over and started picking up the pieces one by one and moving them into the holes. And I had thought for sure Shiloh was just going to swipe the board, but they saw us doing it and they wanted to do it. So I had to observe my own self there and say, wait a minute, that's not fair. Give them a minute and build that trust. And they didn't let me down. And sometimes they do, and that's okay. Don't assume all babies like or don't like the same things. Observe your baby's preferences. So I have a coworker who will say, oh, babies, they'll never eat the broccoli when we give it for snack. They never eat broccoli. But I feel like some babies do eat broccoli. We can't say that. So this is like with massage. So when I practice massage, I can't assume that I can start at the head and then go to the shoulders and then move to the back and then the legs, because everyone is different, right? The way that we touch everyone, either with our hands or with ourselves, is different. Everyone has different preferences. So we just have to check in. So getting to know your child through observation is critical because how you perceive them affects how you treat them. When you start to see that your nanny children are these very capable humans from the start, it's incredible. And you can really take your hands off and just leave them be and you'll see how much we can learn from them. It's very powerful. A sensitive observer is peaceful and calm. Relax and observe what your child focuses on. By observing your child, you discover their unique personality. By understanding their individuality, you learn to deal with their needs. And through sensitive observation, you are laying the groundwork for good communication with your child. So the goal is that we want emotionally intelligent children, right? This starts from birth. And when they're teenagers, their parents are going to call us up and they're going to say, thank you for introducing us to these methods, because I now have a teenager that I can talk to. That hasn't happened to me yet, but I'm still hopeful. We'll see. That's the goal. Observation, how to, here we go. Time periods to consider. So in the moment, you may be observing, this baby's crying. Why? What's happening, right? We all do that every day, all the time. You're always doing that. Over time, we know every day at 4 p.m., this baby poops. And then we can set aside time during the day, especially for when the child is in an independent, focused mood. This can be a 3-minute observation. We literally have a form at the school where I used to work. It's a 3-minute observation. If you have a hectic morning, you can sit down for 3 minutes and you can jot some notes down where everybody is, what they're doing. So in this moment right here, this is Zyler on the couch and Caden in the purple shirt, they're twins, and Zavi in the green shirt. And each one of them in this moment has taken out a book and they're just having an independent moment. They don't need to interact with me. They don't need to do anything. And a lot of times when I was in this environment, I would go to the kitchen and pretend to make something or clean something, or I would like wash a knife for a while, just so that I could be, because if I'm in the environment with them, they're going to want to interact with me. And I'm going to become part of their work because they're social beings, right? And I don't want to do this. I don't want to interrupt them. So the way that I do that is I just kind of back off and I practice my observations when we're all in this independent mood. So we need to put everything aside. Can't have any distractions. We can pretend to be busy with another task. We have to set aside our expectations of what we think the child wants or is doing. This is the biggest one for me, right? Because we've been doing this for so long and we've seen toddlers and we know that face that they make when they're about to do a thing. And we just have to wait because we don't always know. We have to give some space if they start to fuss. We don't need to rescue them. If we know that they're safe, if we don't know and they could potentially be hurt, don't give space. Go check it out. Safety, number one priority. If they start to fuss, give them a minute. Maybe they just need to like wiggle out of maybe their clothing is like wrinkled under their back or something. They just need to wiggle out of that moment. And you need to watch without an agenda. And we can ask those open-ended questions. Remember, like, what is their focus? What is challenging them? Is there something in the way for them? These are the questions we want to ask to ourselves. And you can take some notes. I like to document with my phone. I know I said put your phone down if you're documenting a short video, or if you're taking a picture, just do it quick and then put it down. So here's an example. This is a fun one. We did this all the time in the school that I was in. This is called a curve of work. So essentially the way this works is that you would say, I'm going to observe this child. If you have, like Cameron, you have twins, you would decide twin Albert, you're going to observe Albert for the morning. So at 9:15, Albert's at the work shelf posting wooden eggs. So posting, remember Zavi was posting the pom-poms into the Quaker Oats container. So posting is putting things inside of things. So you may have these little wooden eggs. And then at 9:25, Albert's now in the pots and pans cabinet. They're like banging them around. They're putting the lids on, taking them off in the kitchen. And you're like, okay, this seems to be, let's see. Okay, 9:35, Albert's still in the same cabinet. They haven't left that cabinet. They're still doing that work. So that's telling me that there's something in there for Albert. They want to do these containers right now. So on their work shelf, I might put some containers. I'm going to put some screw top containers. I'm going to put some little pop top containers. You can get these in your local recycling bin. Anywhere you can put wallets, like those little change purses that open and close. So this is a work that Albert's into, either opening and closing, or taking off and putting on, or maybe it's the sound, we don't know, but we can put a work on the shelf based on that. And then at 9:45, 10 minutes later, so you see we're doing this in 10-minute increments. So it just takes a minute to look. You can set a timer on your phone. Every 10 minutes, it's going to go off. You make sure you're looking at what Albert's doing and you write it down. So now Albert's at the work shelf putting puzzle pieces on their head, and okay, it looks like Albert's done with that puzzle. I'm going to switch that puzzle out. I'm going to go down the basement or wherever your storage space is, and you're going to pull out a different puzzle. So they have something new to do. And maybe you want to do a hat work. Maybe Albert's saying hat, hat, hat. And you think, I want to put a little work on the shelf. It's a basket of hats. I can put a winter hat, and I can put a baseball hat, and I can put a little bonnet. And you can have 3 hats in a basket, and maybe Albert would like to put hats on their head. So this is the idea, that we learn from watching what they're doing, and then we can develop our shelves based on that. This takes time and practice and collaboration. And if you want to do it together, email me, tell me what your children are doing, and I'll try and help you think of a work. We're going to go through a lot of work though. So, and if you have a great work, email me. I always want to know. Okay. So here is an example, another example of observation. Here's Zavi at 16 months old, trying to do a hook and eye latch. Tell me what you see. So I fixed that door for Zavi, and then Zavi fixed it for themselves. And they kind of lost focus, you see? And they went right back to it. This is an excellent fine motor work. We talk about the prepared environment. You can see that I have brought a stool over there because I had seen Zavi earlier in the weekend trying to do this, and I wanted to provide that for them. So that when they came back to the space, they would be able to go up there and reach it. So as you're looking at this, watch Zavi's hands. It's that pincer grasp, right? And this, if you can see me, is different than this. This is an important practice. Oh, and then Zavi got it. So now you can see Zavi's hand is getting tired. It's the end of the day too. But he can't stop. He wants to just keep going. He's asking for help. I'm trying not to help him. I'm trying to establish what kind of help he needs. Because really, I think he wants me to do it for him, or he wants me to make his hand be able to do it again. And now the struggle is turning to frustration. You hear it? So I'm going to invite him to take a break. I say, do you want to take a bath? It's bedtime. It's close to bedtime. So you can see, right? He was really focused. There was very little language from me. And then there's that scaffolding, right? Like I'm going to help him. Scaffolding is the concept that we provide support, as little support as they need to keep moving forward with it. So he needed help with that door in the beginning. He couldn't get that door straight. So I fixed the door for him. And then when he finished it, I didn't say, oh, yay, hooray. I was saying it inside of myself. I was like jumping for joy. But for him, I didn't want to make it about me, right? I didn't want to make it about my approval of the thing that he had done. It had to be about him because the satisfaction comes from him. That's the intrinsic motivation that keeps him going and wanting to do it again. And then at the end, when that struggle turned to frustration, we just moved on to the next thing. So Horme, this is the idea of Horme. Horme is a really cool concept. The child's nature is to aim directly and energetically at functional independence, being able to do everything by themselves, function independently. Development takes the form of a drive toward an ever greater independence. It is like an arrow released from the bow, which flies straight, swift, and sure. The child's conquest of independence begins with their first introduction to life. While they're developing, they perfect themselves and overcome every obstacle that they find in their path. A vital force is active within them, and this guides their efforts towards their goal. It is the force called Horme. And she credits it to Sir Percy Nunn, but I think it's older than that. So this is this concept of horme. This was the idea of Xavi wanting to just keep going. Once he did it, he wanted to do it again and again and again. Horme is a really valuable concept to consider with toddlers because we see this all the time, and it can be mislabeled. So it's the repetition of a task. And when they're distracted, they get really, really distressed. A lot of our emotional storms or temper tantrums come from this interruption of this horme. I have a drive, I have to do this thing. And even if you're telling me to stop, I can't stop. So if they see a cat across the street and it looks fluffy and soft and they've never touched a cat and it has a tail, like they're going for it. They don't know about cars and you're saying, stop, stop. And they can't. They're not going against the thing that you're saying, right? They're like, I got to get my hands on this thing. What is this? This is so cool. So sometimes it can be mislabeled as impulsivity if we don't know what to look for. So in terms of, this is why we want to have our non-judgmental observations, right? We can't say someone's being impulsive. We can say someone's running across the street, trying to run across the street to get the cat. Because then people grow and they change, and they will, and it takes a while. So let's talk about development. So just one more on horme. When you start to look for this, when you go to work next and you see maybe you're at work, maybe you live at work, I don't know. Next time you see your nanny baby, look for these instances of horme. It's very cool when you start to see it. This drive. It's very powerful to think that their brain is growing in this very moment. And we're just sitting here watching them. So development, let's talk about those sensitive periods, okay? Dr. Montessori says, man's intelligence does not come from nothing. Rather, it is built upon the foundations laid by a child during the sensitive periods. So this is where the deep, deep learning happens. This is our sensitive period chart. Remember this? And again, it's subject to change, but this is the idea. And we're going to go through all the sensitive periods. Special care should be shown for the psychic life of the newborn child. If it already has such a life at birth, how much greater will it be as it grows older? If we understand by education a child's psychic rather than its intellectual development, we may truly say, as it is said today, that a child's education should begin at birth. This is my friend Mika at like 1 hour old with her dad. She's now in kindergarten. A critical time, so sensitive period, here's what it is. It's a critical time during human development when the child is biologically ready and receptive to acquiring a specific skill or ability and is therefore particularly sensitive to the stimuli that promote the development of that skill. So a Montessori teacher prepares the environment to meet the developmental needs of each sensitive period. And it should say a Montessori guide there, sorry. My slip up, you see, I still have work to do. So we're going to go through these sensitive periods. So these are the qualities of a child in a sensitive period. They're drawn to activities that satisfy that sensitivity. They exhibit spontaneous concentration when engaging in an activity that satisfies that sensitivity. That means they're going to go right into that concentration, right into that mode. It's going to happen quick. And it's a very deep concentration, and they're repeating the activity without any external reward. So it's not because I'm saying, good job, you got the hook and eye latch, you should do it again. It's because they're like, I got to do the hook and eye latch again. I just figured it out. I want to do it some more. And then their interest is temporary. So there's a lack of attention as soon as the activity has been mastered. So they might do it 100 times over a 2-week period, and then they're never going to do it again. And there's often, again, that horme, the extreme distress at being distracted or taken away from the activity that satisfies the sensitivity. So here's a list of our sensitive periods. We're going to go through most of them. We're not really going to talk very much about writing and reading because that's beyond our age scope. So order, let's talk about order. Order is a fun one. They're all fun. Okay. So especially exhibited in ages 1 until age 5 or 6 years of age. So currently my youngest child is entering a sensitive period for order, and my oldest is leaving it. So the other day we were coming inside from being outside, and my oldest child kicked off their boots and like just tossed them aside. And my little one, my toddler, came along behind and like picked up the boots and put them on the shelf where they belonged. So you can see this in these moments. And it's exhibited by a desire for consistency, repetition, and routines. Everything has a place. So the child is disturbed by disorder or inconsistency. So in Montessori, you're not going to see any battery operated toys. It's not a thing. But if you work with children who are accustomed to battery operated toys, this is what they're accustomed to. This is what they know. So I was speaking to my mom recently, who's been taking care of my niece, who is a year and a half old. My sister has a lot of battery operated toys. And my niece was going over to my mom's house to be taken care of. And there's a toy basket there. And my mother has taken, because I'm so outspoken, has taken all of the battery operated toys out of the toy box, even though we don't spend time at her house now because of COVID. But my niece went there and started pulling every toy out of the bin. And my mother said to me, something's wrong with this child. They're a spoiled brat. They look at one toy and then they move on to the next and to the next and to the next. And so I did a little bit of prodding and I said, well, what's going on? And as it turns out, my niece, Adeline, was looking for the battery operated toys because in Adeline's sense of order, toys have batteries. They do a thing. When you push a button, they do a thing. In her mind, this is how it works. And she couldn't find it. So she was getting more and more distressed because she's saying, where I have this understanding about the world, this is the way it works. And so in explaining that to my mother, I was able to say, maybe you can put a couple of battery operated toys in the space for her so that it makes her feel and understand that there is the same order. So we can do this in all kinds of ways. We can make this work in the environment that we are given. We can make those changes slowly. So there's a value of consistency in the environment. Remember, inner order develops from outer order. And we need to be on the same page as our parents for this. This is really important. Okay, movement. Let's talk about the sensitive period for movement. This is birth to 6 years. And we're talking about moving from disorder to order. So the movements are uncoordinated at birth and become coordinated with attention and practice. And so if we're thinking about prehension, which is that like grasping reflex that an infant has, that they're not doing intentionally, it just comes, to intentional reaching and grasping. So that's an example from disorder to order. And then there's an importance of risk taking here, right? So, and we're going to talk about gross and fine motor movements when we talk about our environment, but the importance of risk taking, it's very valuable in the development of their independence and their self-confidence. And we can do that and let them take those risks without getting in their way. Sometimes we need to get in their way if they're being unsafe. Okay, language, here it comes again, birth to 6 years. So the acquisition of language, both receptive skills and expressive. So it's happening all the time, even when we can't see it or don't realize it. So recently I was with my current little infant friend who's 8 months old, and I was helping them change their diaper, and their mom came into the bathroom and said, started asking me a question about something, and we were chatting, and I looked back at the baby and I noticed that the baby was watching us chat, just watching, when I was speaking, the baby was looking at me, and when she was speaking, the baby was looking at her. So they're always watching us too, and they're always learning that language. And it looks like everything. It's everything you see. They're watching you speak. They're bringing you books. They're attentive with conversation around them. They practice babbling. And if you have a child who's easily distractible, when someone comes in the room and starts talking, they're in that sensitive period for language. And that can be hard in a classroom with a lot of children, but hopefully in your home environment, you can set up a space where you can help to isolate those moments so that they don't have to tune in all the time, or it's not happening all the time. And we can support by talking back with our quality speech and our real words. Okay, small objects. This is a fun one. This is ages 1 to 4. They start to have a real fixation on details, and there's some understanding that this has to do with early math concepts. And then they'll often collect tiny things or carry them around, and it supports their fine motor development and their hand-eye coordination. So what you can do, and this is actually true of any sensitive period, if you have a child in this sensitive period, you can use tiny objects to draw their attention to an area of development that they're not otherwise interested in. So for example, I had a child in a classroom who was not in a sensitive period for language, would not go to that area of the classroom, wanted nothing to do with it, but was very much in a sensitive period for small objects. So we created a tiny little bag with all of the animals, the tiny little animals from Little Blue Truck. Remember that book, Little Blue Truck? And so that's not a realistic thing. There's some fantasy in that because there's animals that are driving around in a truck, but we used it for this purpose. And that child came over to the book area and would read this book with us because they had access to all of those tiny animals. So we got to practice language while we were doing this. So you can cross over your sensitive periods. If you have a child who's not practicing something and you want to get them interested, you can use a sensitive period that they're practicing. So my nanny baby right now is not interested in being on their belly, and they're starting to sit up on their butt and scoot, and we really want them to practice crawling. So we have a little object permanence box with a ball, and it goes into a hole, and they just started doing this and they're really into it. So we can lay on our bellies on our play mat with the object permanence box, and we can do this. So they're really interested in doing this work, the posting work, and I can help them to stay on their belly for a little bit longer by drawing them back into that other work that they're interested in. So we can cross over all of these. Also, watch out for children putting things in their mouths. If they're in that early oral stage, don't confuse that. And if your child is like hoarding beans, dry beans in their mouth, don't give them beans. So just don't confuse these stages. This will come a little bit later, and you just need to make sure that your child is past that oral stage, or you can be really, really safe if you have small objects in your environment. Okay, grace and courtesy is from approximately ages 2 to 6. I would argue that it starts a little sooner than that. And it has to do with cultural learning. So learning what to do by watching others, mirroring, and modeling. So interest in interacting with peers and adults. And so this looks like greetings, opening and closing a door quietly as opposed to slamming it. Taking off your shoes when coming inside, putting work away back on the shelf when you're done with it, blowing your nose into a tissue and throwing it away, handling a book appropriately so you're not ripping the pages out of it, hand washing, using gentle hands, the cadence of conversation with peers and also adults, and so on. It's waving, hello and goodbye, a handshake or a high five, right? We're never going to force a handshake. We're going to offer it as an opportunity for someone. We never want to make someone uncomfortable in that way. So it's anything that has to do with really how you work in community with other people in the world and taking care of yourself. So these are my friends, Parker and Levi on the slide, and they're negotiating who's going to go down the slide first. So this is a practice in grace and courtesy. And children need a lot of assistance. Toddlers need a lot of assistance with this. I haven't met very many toddlers where grace and courtesy comes naturally. So refinement of the senses. Children live in their 5 senses, 7 senses. We'll talk about those. This is birth to age 6. So it's a fascination with any experience that has to do with any of the senses. They want to experience everything in their environment. You know what this looks like. They mouth everything. They touch everything. They're always listening. There's often a willingness to try new foods for a while until that changes, right? There's curiosity about everything. They're asking 1,000 questions once they get that language. It's the attention to detail. And so it involves the taste, smell, sight, sound, and touch senses. And touch also includes, so touch is a lot of things. It has to do with weight. Remember those golden beads I showed you? That's our weight. We're talking about the way that things, so when we are pulling our materials together for this practice, we want to think about how they feel in our hands. So plastic toys aren't usually recommended in a Montessori environment because you can't learn very much about them, as opposed to things like wood that have more of a weight, or metal that you can touch, or glass, right? Temperature, the stereognostic sense. So that's the ability to identify something with touch. So if you have a mystery bag and you can reach your hand in and you can ask an older toddler to say, can you pull out the hairbrush? And they would reach in without looking, and then they would pull out the hairbrush. It's a stereognostic sense. Proprioception is the 6th sense, awareness of your body and space. That's how you like walk through a room and you can walk around the chair instead of walking into it. And then there's the vestibular sense, which is all about balance. Okay, so let's talk about math and math patterns. And math patterns for an infant, what? Okay, so this starts from birth. And it's really object permanence. So that's that object permanence box I was telling you about. It's called an IMCARE box. I don't think I have a picture of it actually for you, but there'll be one. I can show you one. It's putting something inside of something and not knowing if it's still there when it disappears, right? It's when they get this around, what is it, like 9 months, I think, when like they start to get upset when their parents leave the room. I don't know if they're ever coming back. So distinguishing the difference between two things. For a toddler, it's noticing patterns and routines and counting, matching and sorting colors, pictures, and objects. We do a lot of this. A lot of toys are designed for this purpose. So this right here that you're seeing is a sink or float game that I made an infant version of for my toddler this summer on a whim. We were outside playing and I had to think of something quick. So I made a sink or float, and that's categorizing, right? Like my infant didn't know that we were playing sink or float, but what you can do for a toddler is you can have a bunch of objects in a basket, and then you can have a little bucket of water, and then you can invite them to determine if the objects sink or float one at a time as they put them into the water. Children love, love, love water work. They're always doing water work or looking to do water work, which you probably know. So we're not really going to get into these ones. I just want to give you a quick slide and share with you. So the sensitive periods related concepts. So music is rhythm and it's order and mathematical thinking with patterns and pitch. And then we have social relationships, which is that language and grace and courtesy and rules. So on the left are other sensitive periods that have been identified. And then on the right, I have just put kind of how they fit into the concepts that we've talked about. So spatial relationships is really size, comparisons, mathematical thinking and order, and movement. So that's really like an older skill that comes along a little bit later. And then letters, shapes, and sounds, they come through that sense of order and through language development. They come through very naturally, they come through. Okay, so here's an example I want us to observe. This is a resource that I'm going to have on your resource list. It's montessoriguide.org. They have really, really beautiful videos. You can spend a lot of time here. I highly recommend it. It's I have it listed for you, but it's called Assistance to Infancy. And they have gone in and just done these videos of children doing work in a classroom. So you can see. Well, let me see. I might have to, let's see if we can do this. I think I queued it up here for you. Okay. Can you see it? Can you give me a nod if you can see it? Okay, cool. Thank you. This is a guide helping a child who's already had a lesson. This is not their first lesson, because if it were their first lesson, the guide would be doing it and the child would be watching. So the guide has already done every movement with their own hands, and the child has watched. Your language is very intentional. And you can see this child is also in a sensitive period for language. They're trying hard to focus, but they're looking up when other people are speaking because it's so interesting. And that's okay. That's just part of the process. And that guide has walked away. This child is spreading their own jam. And that guide is putting a lot of trust in this child to treat those materials with respect. And the child is doing so beautifully. Okay. So, I don't know if you can hear my child crying in the background. They are getting ready for their second nap. And I'm sorry about that if you can. I hope it's not distressing for anyone. My husband is with them, taking care of them. They're not alone. Okay, so can you see the slides again? Okay, so what did you observe and what sensitive periods are shown here? I just clicked too far, so maybe you saw already. And I'll tell you what I saw. So I noticed that they switched their hands from the left or the right and then to the left and then to the right again with the knife, right? So just an observation, doesn't really mean anything, just an observation. They stayed seated the whole time. They were pretty well focused on that work the whole time. They were distracted by other children in the environment, but then they went right back to their work. So that's our job in the environment, is to mitigate those distractions, because we want the child to be able to focus on the work that they're doing. And sometimes it's inevitable, and that's okay. I'm distracted by my child crying. Just need a minute. They're coming up to bed right now, I can tell. So they also took great care in getting the jam out of the cup. And you can tell that the child had a lesson on it, and they were repeating those steps exactly as they were shown. That's why they were being so careful with it, because when they were given the lesson, they were shown it in a way that was very, very deliberate and careful. So the sensitive periods that I observed were order, movement, and refinement of the senses in that. And the child had like a cup full of jam. Like they could have just like put their face in it and just started eating it. It's sweet, it's jam, it's delicious, but they didn't do that. They really wanted to do the work. Okay, so we're getting to the end of our observation piece. I just want to invite all of you, sorry about the crying, to check out the CDC's website. They have a nice bit on developmental milestones, and it's by month. And so I think, you know, if you're not yet really confident in the stages of child development, this is a nice one. And then they also have like lists of videos that you can go and watch what the children are doing at certain ages. And so the value of this, the value of this is that, you know, I think a lot of us now are home with children during COVID, when our children and our nanny children would have other eyes on them. They would be in a program, or they would be out with other children. So if there's something that's not developing quite right, we're kind of the only eyes on them right now. So it is important to be versed in this stuff. You can check it out. This is going to be on your resource list. It's pretty easy to understand and look through and spend some time in. So a lot of you, I want to jump into our breakout session. And I guess actually before we do that, I want to invite anyone who has questions. Does anyone have questions about that observation section? We have a few minutes for questions if you want to talk about some stuff. We're doing good on time. We're doing well on time, excuse me. So I'm going to come back so I can see you all. I'm going to pause my screen share. Okay, does anyone have questions about the observation section right now?
Hi, Katie. This is Raquel. I'm from New York. Well, actually from Italy. Sorry, I'm sick at the moment, so
no.
I'm going to keep my screen off.
Okay.
I hope you don't mind. My question was, I noticed how you used the term lesson, and I was wondering, how does that happen? Is it like individual? Would the guide take time to teach a certain step, or is it like, do you do it like all together? Yeah, so that was one of my questions.
So that's a great question. Yeah, the idea when we give a lesson, and we're going to see lessons when we do our environment piece. I think we're seeing a lesson at the end of today, actually. But what you can do is you can do an individual lesson, or you can do a group lesson. So when we're in the classroom, we might be seeing that there's like a few children who are distracted and they're not interested in working. And I'm going to pull a work off the shelf and I'm going to say, hey, Graham, I got to show you something. Come on over here. I want to show you this work. And I'm going to say, hey, Parker, check this out. Come sit down with me. Come check this out. And it's a way of drawing children in. They love to work with you. They always want to be with you, right? And so we can bring them and we can do a group lesson on a rug and we can invite them to watch, or we can do an independent lesson. If I'm going to be doing a pouring lesson, I might invite just Ailey to come over. Ailey, come on over here. I want to show you this thing. I want to show you what pouring works. Because I've seen through my observations that Ailey is interested in water and is trying to dump everything out everywhere Ailey goes. And so I'm saying to myself, Ailey's ready for a pouring lesson. Let's do this. So that might be an individual lesson. If it, and all the work is going to be an individual work. So if I do it in a group, if I'm with, 2 or 3 children, I might say, oh, I'm going to give Parker a chance to try this work out. Now, would you like a chance to try it out? And then after that, I'm going to say, Graham, would you like a turn to try this out? So we can do a group lesson or we can do an individual lesson. Either one is an option. Does that answer your question? Is that the whole question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So
I'm
much.
sorry you're sick. I hope you get better quick.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have an observation question?
I have a question on observation.
Hi.
Hi. I'm coming from a unique situation that I was a Montessori 3 to 6 teacher
Oh,
and elementary teacher for several years, but now I've been a caregiver for like 8 years. And I've worked with lots of toddlers in the home, but I'll be starting a new job soon where the expectation is to use my Montessori. So that'll be great when you
Right.
get to work for a family that wants to use your background.
nice.
So my question, and they're twins, they'll be 24 months. So I'll be pulling on my nanny experience and my Montessori experience. So I understand how observation happens in the classroom, that the children kind of get used to it. There's like 24 kids and they're like,
Right.
oh, that's the observation chair. And that's, oh, the clipboard. Then they know that that's what you're doing when they see you with the clipboard. But in the home, my question is how to normalize this idea of observation so that they don't think just because you're present, they're supposed to go curl up in your lap or interact with you, because that's very different, right? The home
Yeah.
and playing and a caregiver. So I'm just curious what's ahead of me, what certain tips or understanding this age group better now that I have the privilege of going into that format of lessons and in a prepared environment and all those things I used to do. Could you speak more to this age, like 24 months old, and
Yeah.
used to that idea of observation? Do I need to teach them the word observation and normalize them to that the way we did in the classroom, or is it different because they're so young?
So first of all, I think it's really cool that you're going to go into a home and be at, pretty quickly within the beginning age of your expertise already. And you can bring all that 3 to 6 goodness with you. That's so awesome. And I love that kind of a gig. That's really exciting.
I'm super excited. I've been looking for this for like 4 months. So it's
Oh, so cool.
Yeah.
So, I feel like that's where, when we do that home, the home observations, that's where I'm looking like I'm busy. I can't always sit down and do that. I can, especially when they're in a community. I guess it depends on the child. If there's one child, sometimes I'll make myself out of their sight range. So that picture of Nora, I wasn't in Nora's sight. If Nora was gonna be if I had walked around Nora to go sit down in a chair, Nora would have seen me and probably been distracted. But I was over in a different space and I would sort of stay out of that line of sight where Nora would have to turn around and find me. And then so that I'm not going to distract Nora. Nora's going to have to think, I want to find Katie, and then go look for me. So that's where I'm kind of making myself busy in the kitchen. And I think that once they start to develop that independent practice without you, then you can probably move into the space where they are and sit down on the edge of a couch at the edge of the space, and you can sort of slowly move closer. And then that might be a conversation where you would say, they might notice you with, maybe when you're in the kitchen, well, I guess you'd be, if you're sitting down with a notebook, then I would feel confident saying, I'm unavailable right now, but I can help you in just a minute. I was noticing that you were, pouring that water over there. Were you still working on that, or are you all done? And so to draw them back to their activity, if they're distracted by me, to draw them then back into their own activity. And then, and then sort of, I think it's going to be a slow buildup for you. If you're in an environment where children haven't been observed before and they're accustomed to having people be at their ready when they want.
So going stealth and incognito to get them used to, yeah. I'm also wondering, because they're 24 months and they're twins, twins like to get into each other's space, which is beautiful, but also I wonder if I'll have to introduce the term of observation. I've met them once. I don't work with these children yet, but I'm just guessing that because if I give them a lesson together, I'm going to have to teach them that we need to remove one child and let that child do it on their own, right? Or is that?
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great point. So I think that's kind of what I was saying about if we do a group lesson, right? That we want to invite one child to then do it and the other child. So I'm doing that already with my 13-month-old, and then someone reached out and said, can you help me figure out this relates to someone else had asked me, can you talk about siblings? So if we have an infant and we have a 4.5-year-old, so like my 5-year-old right now is doing these very in-depth magnetile structures, and my toddler is like, you're building that for me and I get to come and knock that down. And, you know, like they're in these different stages. So I have to be able to step in. And this is where I provide a physical boundary. Because if I stand from the other side of the room and say, stop, 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 they can't stop, right? That's the horme. So I need to physically be there. And my 5-year-old has grown very patient with this, to be able to say, and I'll put a hand up and look at Shiloh in the face and I'll say, I see that you really want those magnetiles. I see that Zavi has built this structure. I would love to build a structure for you that you could knock over. So I need you to wait. So that physical boundary, and we're going to talk a lot more about that in our limit setting of how to do that and provide that boundary for children. That's more tomorrow.
Awesome. Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions on observation before we pop over into our breakout rooms? And if you need a break as we're separating into breakout rooms, you can also just jump up and go do that and come back. We're going to have, I think, about maybe 15 or 20 minutes for our conversation. You guys feel ready for that? So let me share the screen again. I just want to run by these questions and I want you to have them visually so that you can kind of see. So a lot of you want to talk about not just the material, but then also communication with employers. And this is a big one, right? Like me too. I'm always thinking about communication and how to do it better. So let's talk about this. So these are questions that we're going to get together in small groups and we're going to kind of take these ideas with you in your small groups. So how can we invite our employers, for lack of a better term, to buy into this community concept? If we're in an environment where our employers are saying, you do this, you're the expert, you're the child development professional, can you just make the environment and then like tell me what to do? But the reality is that this is a community, right? So we all need to be willing for our children to be in this shared space and sweeping in effectively and giving them time to dress themselves and not rushing them. And this is going to be something that we all have to be on board with. So how do we do this? What specific ways can we share some of this information with them so that we can all be on board? And so if you guys can share with each other, I'm going to try and jump in these rooms and I might try and check on my child too, who's screaming. How have you practiced information sharing in the past and what has been effective in terms of consistency, right? This is a big one, I think, for us going into people's homes is the consistency. We do things one way, parents do things a different way. That's tricky. So how do we get them on board also for potential observation practices? And then let's talk about, like, if you're planning on doing an overhaul and once you learn this stuff, you want to change out the works that are on the shelves. How do we communicate that? And then seeing what looks like less on the shelves. These parents might see that you're going to take a whole bunch of stuff out of this space and you're going to have a couple of things and they're going to be like, oh, that's not enough for my child. And so how do we help them understand this is enough and there is great benefit to this? So how do we communicate this? I'm hoping that you all have some excellent insight here. Did everyone get those questions? I'm going to stop the share so we can go into breakout rooms. If you want to take a screenshot, you can. We have at least a couple of Montessori teachers in here. This is so great. I hope you're observing me and ready to like give me notes because I'll expect that. I'm sorry to end it. I feel like we should get through the rest of the material today. But there's some really good stuff happening. And I want to hear, if you want to drop in the chat, maybe something that you're working on or that you guys talked about in your groups. Not you guys. I'm really trying to stop saying you guys. I always say you guys. I practice gender neutral language, but I still have you guys in there. So if you all have some notes that you want to share with us about communication, things that you figured out, things you've experienced, if you can do it in like a sentence or two in the chat. And then I'm going to share, Eleni, is it okay to just keep going?
Yeah, go for it.
I'm going to share, I made a little list. And then I want to come back and check on the chat. So I was brainstorming this too. And some things that I have done in the past. and thinking about sort of like at the end of the day, right? Like there is potentially an opportunity for a chat at the end of the day of just saying, oh, so your child did this today. And I noticed that they were really into this. And it reminds me of this Montessori concept that I've been reading about. Maybe I can share something with you about it, or just to say something. Or I noticed that they were really interested in putting all the toys in the trash. So I think we should pull out a posting work for them. I can tell you all about posting if you're interested. So just a quick one in that way. Another way would be a weekly newsletter, which you can do. And you can, when I charge my rate, I include time that I'm not at work with the assumption that I'm going to be spending that time providing resources. So I set a rate that feels fair to me, where I don't mind taking a couple of hours a week and doing this for people because I feel like I work that in to what they're already paying me. And I set that boundary, that's okay with me. You don't have to do that. It's just an idea. But a weekly newsletter is just like I've taken, 4 pictures a day, and maybe I send one picture from each day. And I say, I noticed your child doing this today. And I noticed your child doing this on Thursday. I noticed your child, whatever it is, just a quick one. And then you can connect a Montessori concept to that, to share with them. This is this repetitive thing that your child has been doing. This must be a sensitive period. You can throw it in there. The other thing is I worked for one family who I worked for them for like 2.5 years, and I saw the mom in person like 6 times ever. She worked all the time. She was a great mom. She was an excellent mom. And the 6 times that I saw her, she didn't want to talk to me because she wanted to be with her kid. She was coming home and it was like 6:30 at night, and she had like a half an hour before bedtime, and she was like, it's really nice to see you. I'm going to go hang out with my child. And I was like, awesome, I'll email you. And all of our communication was by email, and that worked. That was fine. She was at her desk all day long. So when I had days off, I would email her and say, this is what your child was up to this week. So we can do that. And she would read, and I actually ended up writing a lot for them. I would write these articles and say, I noticed that your child is pulling the cat's tail, and here are ways, or she would say to me, can you help us? And they had another nanny. So I would come in and support their nanny, and I would spend time with and coach their nanny with Montessori. And then I would usually leave the child with the nanny when I left and the mom was still at work. So I did a lot of work with them of supporting them with learning the Montessori concepts via email and articles that I would write and then, or source and then send to them. You can also invite parents to email you. If you're into that, again, if you work it into your rate and you feel comfortable with email and you want to do that, have them email you and say, if you're noticing something that your child's doing and you're wondering about it, email me, let's talk. I can send you resources. Or quarterly check-ins. I worked with one family where we did these progress reports. It was like 4 times a year, and we would schedule it because they were busy. And we would say, let's check in and see how things are going. That's an option. So over time, you can do this. And then also enthusiasm and encouragement. I think I was in one group where we're talking about working with a family with a baby for the first time, or a family with a couple of children already. I think those families who are new, they need to know, like, you don't need to know everything about child development to know what to do with your child. You know what to do with your child. You already know. And if you have questions, I'm happy to provide resources, but trust yourself, right? And that encouragement, enthusiasm really helps. So those were my ideas that I came up with just thinking about it. And then I'm just going to check what's in the chat. Rye, Pickler, and Montessori. Yeah, I mean, it's a good combo. I definitely think probably there's a lot of, for me, I haven't really looked outside of that. So I think, there's probably a lot of other cultures that have some really cool concepts that maybe we haven't looked into, but I agree. Those are a lot of the ones that I'm tuned into at the moment. Okay. You guys feeling good? You ready to keep going? Okay, let's do it. We're going to start our environment. And if you have any other ideas that weren't covered, because this is like the box that I think inside of, if you're outside of this box, I want to know what you do. Because I was saying to one group, I have tricky communication stuff too, but I would love to know how you manage it. Okay, part 3, let's begin to talk about our environment today. We have about 30 minutes left, 28 minutes left today. So let's see, I just want to start to introduce you to the beginnings of the environment. We're going to talk about preparing the environment and the qualities of it, the work shelves and you're going to see a presentation of a material. So Dr. Montessori says, a child's incarnation is effected through hidden toil, and there is a drama about the creative efforts that has yet to be written. We should regard this secret effort of the child as something sacred. We should welcome its arduous manifestations, since it is in this creative period that an individual's future personality is determined. So this is from The Secret of Childhood. This is one of Dr. Montessori's books. So she says, the environment is not just the place where the child acts and carries out their work, but the means through which, within which, and by which the child forms their personality, builds up their human characteristics, and brings forth latent human potential. As food is to the child's body, so is the environment to their character. And the truth is that right, we don't always know what sensitive period our child is in at the moment. So we're going to do our best to prepare the environment to satisfy each one. And that's where our observation comes in. And that's when we're going to have to tweak it. And this, I'm going to be honest with you, the environment piece of being a Montessorian is a big piece. And it's the most difficult piece for me because it's a living environment. It's always changing. We're always looking. If there's something collecting dust on the shelves, we're going to take it out and replace it with something else. If that child is misusing that puzzle and they're putting on their head, they're done with it. They need something else. So we have to do it through watching. So preparing the environment. This is a big one. Our environment, we want free choice. Children are much happier when they're allowed to choose the work that they want rather than being guided to the work by an adult. So we're going to observe and then make that work available, and we're going to see if they go to it. Maybe they need to be guided to it because they don't know it's there, because there's nothing has been on that shelf, or it's been the same puzzle for weeks and weeks and weeks. And maybe we want to say, oh, look, Parker, did you notice that there's a new puzzle on the shelf? And we can point it out to them, but we don't need to choose their work for them. Repetition. Remember, we want them to be able to have an opportunity to repeat whatever activity it is that they choose. We want purposeful material. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to the works on our shelf. They can take it out. They can put all the little pom-poms in the hole. They can put it back on the tray, and then they can put it back on the shelf. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. The materials are purposeful. And they're real materials over toys. Silence. So silence in an environment is nice. We don't usually play a lot of music. We're going to talk a little bit about music, but the opportunity for a child to really be inside their body and inside their brain. Remember, we talked about the sensitive period for language. If there's music, they might be tuning into the language rather than focusing on their work. So Montessori classrooms are very, very quiet in comparison to other classrooms. Dignity, this is a big one. Like I said before, dignity is a big one. Let's provide dignity to our children. They all have a deep sense of dignity from the start. So to be able to provide this for them is such a gift. And then the absence of imposed rewards and punishments. And we're going to talk a lot more about this tomorrow. It's a big one. Rewards and punishments, two sides of the same coin. It's all about intrinsic motivation. So preparing the environment, a child who has become master of their acts through long and repeated exercises and who has been encouraged by the pleasant and interesting activities in which they have been engaged is a child filled with health and joy and is remarkable for their calmness and discipline. And this is what you see a lot of times in a Montessori environment. People say, they're children, they're not very joyful. What are they doing? Like, they're just being so still and quiet. Aren't children supposed to be running and jumping? Yes, and there is joy in the ability to be peaceful. And both, I think, are present for a child when they have that capability, they choose both. So let's talk about the qualities of a Montessori environment. Remember that concept of disorder to order? So we want that to be built into the material. So this is when we give a lesson, there is a beginning, a middle, and an end. There is order, and the children can create that order from disorder. There's always that structure. So order is the importance of the prepared environment. The puzzles are always on the puzzle shelf. The cutting board is always in the same place. They always know where to find things. We talked about this. Reality, right? No fantasy. We're internalizing the limits of nature and reality. So we want the materials to be grounding for the child. Nature. We always want nature in our environment. If you can have an outdoor environment, that's wonderful. If you can't, that's okay. You can bring houseplants in. You can have an herb garden and a window box. You can make that work. And then there's natural materials like wooden activities. Beauty. Simplicity is quality over quantity is what we want. So there's no need for letters and numbers all over the walls. This is going to come through the materials. These lessons are going to come through the materials. And I was just in a breakout room with someone who was saying that they are involved in a family or getting involved in a family who really wants all of that, those really hard lessons of it's time to learn the alphabet. It's time to learn the numbers. It's time to learn. And that is going to be a hard piece to communicate to parents who want their children to get ahead very quickly, because there's not really an understanding that children don't need to be able to repeat the numbers 1 through 20 to have an understanding of what 1 through 20 is. So we don't have to have that stuff all over the walls. We're going to have it through the work. We're going to gain those lessons. And the atmosphere is critical. So we can create a quiet and calm and a feeling of warmth and acceptance where a child really looks forward to coming into that space every day. So let's talk about babies for a minute. Instead of a walker or an exerciser, let's think about a pull-up bar. So we don't want anything that the child is going to be restricted by. So a playpen, instead of having a playpen and putting a baby inside of a playpen, we could maybe gate off a room. That could be the safe room. This is kind of like the yes space through RIE, right? Instead of a crib, you could try a floor bed. This is a big one for families. Families don't like this. They don't understand why you wouldn't use a crib. In a lot of Western homes, I should say, Western European homes. I think around the world, other people often will use floor beds. Again, you can put a bed on the floor. My child is sleeping right next door in a floor bed, and there's a gate so that when they wake up, they can move freely around their room, and they're not going to be hurt, and they can't get past the safe space because there's a gate. But it's independence of getting out of the room. Instead of a high chair, can we have a small table and chairs? Can we do that for them? Can we sit down on the floor with them? If we're physically able, is that possible? Can we do that so that we can be part of their community and their world? Instead of a sippy cup, we could do a small open glass. This doesn't work for every child. Some children can't figure out how to drink and swallow a big cup right away. A lot of children can, but check with your children, give them an opportunity to try. Instead of a bib, if they wear a bib, they can't feel what it feels like to spill the spaghetti sauce all over their clothes and get wet. So they're not going to notice, and they're not going to necessarily learn to be more careful. Whereas if you have a feeling on your shirt being wet and you have to change your clothes, then you start to learn like, oh, I'm going to get that spoon into my mouth. So instead of plastic toys, let's use real materials. Instead of toy boxes, let's have low open shelves and baskets. And then restrictive clothing, like dresses. Dresses is one. It can hinder movement. Footy pajamas, bows in the hair that can get down in your face. Simpler, elastic waist pants and easy pull-on shirts is nice. And then pull-ups. We always avoid pull-ups in the Montessori classroom because it feels like a diaper. When you put a pull-up on a child, they can just pee in it like a regular diaper. So if you're doing toilet learning and that's where you're at, if you pull on a pull-up, it's the act of pulling on underwear, right? Which I think is how it's supposed to help a child learn. But it catches pee like a diaper does. So they don't really understand. It still wicks the pee away from their body so they don't feel wet. If you put them in underwear, they feel wet. Or cloth diapers. Cloth diapers are great for this opportunity too, because they start to have that body awareness sooner. So it promotes independence and autonomy. That it's self-correcting, right? When you pee in your underwear, you feel it. Okay, let's look at work shelves. So materials, so we call it the work. We call the work on the shelves the work. We don't call them toys. And the reason for this is because this is the child's work. This is the thing that is of great value for them. This is what their brain needs for learning. So toys sort of has this idea that maybe it's not as important. Where do your parents go when they leave the house? They go to work. So our children are doing their work. We want safe, simple, sturdy, and washable materials. because they get messy. We want a variety of sizes, shapes, weights, colors, textures, and materials. You want to be thinking about this as if you're this child, and this is the first time you've ever experienced anything, right? Like you're new in this world. You don't know what this thing feels like. Is this interesting to touch? So now I go to yard sales all the time, not anymore, but I used to. And I just hold things and I feel them. What does it feel like? And if it's interesting to hold it and the weight is interesting and the textures are interesting, that is like going in my Montessori closet. So Magda Gerber says, the more active the toy, the more passive the child. The more passive the child, the more passive the toy, sorry, the more active the child. It's getting close to 3 o'clock. So we want them contained within a tray or a basket and available at the child's level, but we want it to be open. So we want a low basket. We don't want those baskets that like, it's like a box and it goes inside the calyx, and you pull it out. Those ones, they can't see what's in there. So we're going to talk about switching those out. And then consider the tray carefully. So if you have a young child who's just learning how to walk and carry something, and you have a tray that doesn't have handles, they're going to be all over the place with that. If you have a tray that has handles on it, and sides, like little walls, that when they tip it a little bit when they walk, that whatever's on the tray is going to get caught, and they're going to have a higher chance of success in getting to their table if they have a little work table to work at. So we want to prepare that all those materials ahead of time. We want all the works to be complete. We want all the pieces in the puzzle. We want all the rings for the ring stacker. So here's an example of a shelf, and the orientation is left to right and top to bottom. So this is an early reading concept again. So our simplest objects, and maybe if you're in a home environment, you only have one shelf for all of your objects. So you're not necessarily going to do this, but in a classroom, we have a language shelf that's just for language materials. And our simplest, 1 or 2 step works are going to be at the top on the left. And then the most complicated, 20 step works, whatever it is going to be down here on the bottom right. And the concept is that as you move down the rows, it gets more complicated. So they know where to look as the difficulty increases. So I want to show you a presentation of a material. So Dr. Montessori says, do not tell them how to do it. Show them how to do it and do not say a word. If you tell them, they will watch your lips move. If you show them, they will want to do it themselves. Remember, they're watching your lips move because they're in the sensitive period for language, and we want them to be looking at the work and our hands. So another thing we focus on is Montessori guides. And this is like really specific, right? I'm just telling you, so you have the details. Do what feels good, your body, your choice. We don't have a lot of jewelry on. We don't have a lot of nail polish on. We want the focus to be on the work that we're presenting. So if we have these beautiful, gorgeous nails, the children are going to be like, oh, I got to see those. And maybe they won't be. Maybe they're used to your nails. Maybe this is like, they're not going to notice it anymore because they're used to it. Just something to think about. How do we keep the focus on the work? So when we present a lesson, we want to be really deliberate with our language so that we don't distract from the work. We want to think about the point of interest. So this is an interesting concept. So if we have a water pouring work, the points of interest, and when we do our Montessori training, we build these albums. And in our albums, for every work that's going to be on our shelf, we have a list of the points of interest of the work. So I have like an album full of this. But the point of interest of a water pouring work is going to be the pitcher with the handle and the water, right? And then there's going to be a little cloth to wipe it up. So we can keep drawing our children back to the points of interest. If they get distracted or if they're missing a step, we can draw them back to a particular point of interest of the work. So we're going to be thinking about the way that we use our hands and bringing the attention back to the lesson if a child gets distracted. Like if I'm trying to show a water pouring work and the child is looking at something else, I'm going to say, watch, watch. I'm going to use my whisper voice because that always gets their attention more, right? Than being like, hey, I'm over here, I'm over here. I'm going to say, oh, look, I got something to show you. Right? So that's much more interesting if there's like something happening that's quiet. So I want to show you, this is a water pouring lesson. I was going to make all these like lessons for you guys, you all. And then I realized that there are people out here who've done this and they've done a beautiful job and they don't need to reinvent the wheel. So I have a YouTube list for you that I'm going to share with you. And there's a lot of lessons on there. You can watch this person giving, a lot of people giving lessons. And I think I have to, maybe it'll take me there from here. So this is short. And I'm going to start from.
So today I wanted to
I'm going to show you this one instead. So I've already queued it up. So this is a nice one. Here we go.
So this is an activity that we can have out set up for them to practice this. So again, as I demonstrate, I'm going to slow my movements and omit talking. And again, this is a simple activity. I would recommend using a vinyl placemat. It just helps with cleanup and spills. Again, the child is going to explore at this time. Please don't interrupt. It might be that they're going to dip the sponge in and just have fun with the absorbency and such. It's important to let the child really explore with these activities. You have shown how to use it. Of course, if it gets out of hand, I would invite them to clean up, and then you can show it again later, but no need to really correct the child, just reintroduce the activity. And again, we want to also show the child how to put things away.
Okay. So that's a lesson. So a toddler lesson is pretty simple. And it appears simple, but you notice the number of steps that they took. You notice how deliberate they were with their hands. Did you hear the music in the background? I like these videos because they have some background music, and then when they're actually giving the lesson, they cut the music out so you can hear actually what the lesson is. So there's no talking. And if the talking is there, it's very deliberate, or it's to draw the child back to the point of interest, right? And then the music starts up again when the lesson's done. So I like those videos. I think they illustrate a lot of lessons, and there's a lot of them. There's peeling a banana, there's opening a lock, there's opening containers, there's very simple ones, there's more complex ones. And I will send you a link with like 45 videos that you can watch when you want to. So I just want to show you a concept of, so she says, children are endowed with a power that enables them to reconstruct things which are very complex, and they do so with a great deal of pleasure. So that water pouring lesson was not very complex. This is a truck washing lesson. So this has, I think, I can't remember how many, I think it's about 16 steps to it. And essentially it involves the child going to fill the pitcher and then bring the pitcher over and pour it into the tray, and then use the scrub brush and tap it on top of the soap and scrub it, and then scrub the truck, and then wash the truck off and dry the truck off and put all the materials away. This is a multi-step process, and you will see 2.5-year-olds doing like a 20-step work happily and over and over and over again, because they love it. They love doing this work. And it goes on the shelf in exactly the same way every time. And I actually had a friend who worked at the school where I was working before I worked there. And I told her, I just got a job a few years ago. And she said, oh, I was subbing there and I couldn't do it. She was not a Montessori. And she said, they're so specific. She said, they would tell me to go behind children and put the work away if they didn't put their work away. And I would go and put it back on the shelf. And then they would come behind me and they would straighten it out and put it in a different way. And that's very true to Montessori, is that we have in our heads this idea that if there is this, the outer order creates the inner order. So children can do these works when we present them well, and then when we provide them on the work shelf well for them. Okay, so these are the 5 areas of our Montessori environment. And next week, we are going to go into all of these areas, and we're going to talk specifics for these areas. So my question for you is, what is missing here? And this is, I want to save some time for questions. So I'm going to leave you with this for now, and I'm going to say what's missing. So think about this as you see this. Remember, practical life is anything that's in the home, anything that is.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
No,
I just want to make sure, when you said next week, you mean
no,
tomorrow?
I mean tomorrow. Did I say next week? It's almost 3 o'clock. My brain is fried. I'm sorry.
We're good.
We're meeting tomorrow.
Okay.
So practical life is all that stuff, all the stuff in the kitchen, right? The dressing, the hygiene, all of these things where they're going to be taking care of themselves and each other in the community. Sensorial is anything having to do with the senses, anything to touch, smell, taste. Language is everywhere. It's all around us. Cultural studies and art is going to be like a little art shelf and the other things that we bring into our environment. And then there's those math patterns that we talked about, right? So there is a piece missing here. And as you think about your children and the children you spend time with, I'd love to know if you figure out. I can think of at least one part that's missing. And it's the part I spend a lot of time in. So that's it. There you go. There's your cliffhanger. Dun, dun, dun. So next week, we are going to talk about the 5 areas of the Montessori environment in detail. We're going to do our room by room prep. Not next week. It's tomorrow. It's tomorrow. Okay. Come back tomorrow. So we're going to do our room by room preparation and ideas, and we're going to do environmental design. So we're also going to get nice, we're going to have a nice chat about limit setting practices that align with these principles as well. Okay, so I want to pause and I want to invite questions. Tomorrow, sorry, Adventure Nannies, tomorrow. Let's see. What is it saying in the chat? The most important thing is observing the family and the child and responding to what the ecosystem and child need to thrive. Yes, I would love to hear how you're observing right now, April. Sorry, I kept saying next week. It's not next week. Come back tomorrow at 9 a.m. if you're on the West Coast. And if you're in this snowstorm, it's going to be at noon tomorrow.
Can you go into a little bit more about the idea of fantasy? Because I didn't grow up with a particular educational philosophy. I have an aunt who's like a hardcore Waldorf teacher. I was a temp nanny and a nanny in New York. Now I'm back in Michigan. So I've been in environments where people are super hardcore, like this is our philosophy, this is how we do it, to like sort of the Midwest flexibility where we're like, sure, that's great.
Yeah, so off the record, I'm personally more of that middle of the road. I do struggle. I don't do entirely Montessori in my house. I offer it to folks when I work with them because I want them to know. In my experience, I feel like a combination of a lot of different theories is probably a good option. I think it's so natural for children to go into that space. And, like Waldorf, yeah, I'm not trained in it. I don't know a lot about it. But for those of you who don't know, my understanding, maybe Meredith, you can tell us more. My understanding of Waldorf is that it's almost entirely fantasy and everything is encouraged.
I mean, I'm not an expert because I didn't go to a Waldorf. I just grew up getting Waldorf toys for Christmas. And then my cousin is actually a nanny and a Waldorf trained teacher. And she's in Portland, Oregon, but they don't teach like reading and writing until they're older, like 7. And
yeah,
the
that's
entire
right.
elementary school age range, like the early years of like the 0 to 3 is mostly like fantasy play, really encouraging fantasy play, there's a lot of interesting stories, but they also do really interesting projects. Like all my cousins know how to weave who went to Waldorf school. I'm a weaver myself, but I got that as an adult. Like I'm a fibers artist now. So they do really practical things. Like they learn counting through knitting. And so I will say, if you want to learn how to knit, get yourself a Waldorf children's knitting book because you will learn.
Yeah, I feel like, it was interesting because when I was at the school that I was at, my director of education, every year we go and do it used to be twice a year that we would go and do observations at other schools where we would go and spend the entire day at another school and just be in the classroom, which was really incredible learning opportunity. And I always wanted to go to a non-Montessori school because I was like, I see Montessori all the time. I want to go see something else. And this is a hardcore Montessorian. She's been a Montessorian for like 40 years. And she would say to me, like, you can, but I think that you're going to get the most benefit from being in a Montessori environment. And that's the reality, is that people who feel really strongly and strictly about Montessori, they stick with it and they don't do that fantasy play at all. And I think, I understand it, because I think when you go, especially when you go into like a 3 to 6 classroom, and maybe Monica can speak to this too, and I'm not sure, Mara, what your training is, what age group, but I feel like when you go to a 3 to 6 classroom and you see the materials that they have and how concrete those materials are, it's beautiful. Like, it's really, really clear, especially, like if you have a child who is very literal and continues to be literal as they grow, it can be confusing if you bring in these other elements. And I think that's where, like in our school, kind of what we came to is like, when they do it on the playground, we're not going to stop them, right? If it's happening organically and we're not creating that environment, then that's fine. And this is a hard one for me to talk about, because I do see the value in fantasy play. So I don't come from a very strict Montessori perspective where I'm like, no, it's bad. It ruins their spirit. I just don't have that. I don't know. Maybe Monica, do you, in your experience, I don't want to put you on the spot, or Mara, I don't know where Mara is. I can't see you.
Mara's here, and she's 3 to 6 trained as well. So
Oh,
I'll
okay.
give a short answer, and maybe she wants to give an answer too. I think Montessori, I mean, if there's one issue that I think most 3 to 6 Montessorians are like, well, I buy everything except for that issue, it's this issue.
Yeah.
So I think there's a difference between having dolls and being like, hi, how are you? And, everybody's going to do that. If you've taken Psych 101, you've learned about like social scripts, like children play out social scripts. And when they're learning language, there's schema. And, it's particularly helpful when I did after school Spanish classes of using finger puppets and hola, ¿cómo estás? And children, and it's just universal. But dolls are an open-ended toy. It's different. You don't give a child a lesson on how to interact with dolls. You give it to them and they just reflect the psychology of, dolls are how children have learned how to play like for millennia, and they act things out, or, but if you give them a lesson with how to pour or how to put pegs into a pegboard, and they start in the classroom. Now we work in the home, so that's different. But if in the classroom, a child is constantly obsessively taking the pegs or the sponge in the pitcher and just going into their own world, sometimes we would flag that as being escapist, which is different. It's similar. We call it fantasy, and Montessori called it fantasy. But today we interpret that as escapism rather than playing out a folk tale, a story an adult told to them where there happened to be a fairy or a Santa Claus. That's different. So I don't know. I kind of see those as two different categories. And most Montessorians I've worked with have seen that distinction. And I'll just pause now. Maybe Mara wants to respond to what she's learned.
Working in the class, for example, with a toddler class or an infant class, so 3 to 6, we always had like a corner with a little doll and a bed. And it was really soothing for the children. I didn't specifically like show a lesson on that, but that was allowed in the schools that I work. And then my own philosophy is very eclectic. For example, lately I was working in a Reggio Emilia / forest school. And then I got this job and I declined that position. But just being there are elements of other philosophies that can be applied to Montessori. For example, in Reggio Emilia, they use a lot of creativity with art and a lot of found objects, and they recycle. And when I work in a Montessori class, the art area, I leave it more like hands-on and free. And in that area, the children are able to use their imagination more. Like, I like the concept of recycling. So I did work in this school for like a couple of weeks, and there was a Montessorian that I knew that was hired there, and she said that it's very different, but then some of the concepts are very similar, where the child is at the center and we get tips from the child, and what the child likes, then we teach that concept. So if a child is very much into nature, and like I will incorporate that in a way that is still Montessori, where I'm not going to go off on like something fantasy, but yet I keep it concrete, maybe by labeling or by naming the objects by, oh, look, we found a beautiful leaf. I see that is turning colors because it's fall, and let's do a collage. But for example, the other day with this child, we went to Central Park and we found what I call nature treasures. And with that, we're going to create a work. They're little balls that they are from a tree. They are not pine cones, but they look like pine cones. And instead of creating a game, I said, oh, that's great. Let's count them. Which one is big? Which one is small. Can you tell me the medium one? So basically, to them is play. They believe they're playing, but me as the teacher, I'm teaching them a concept.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And I think that's it. I think, and Monica, when you said, you know, that this is the thing that if you ask any Montessorian what they have the least sort of investment in, I think it's this idea that there's just no fantasy. So I think that's, thank you both for sharing that. I hope, Meredith, I hope that answers your question. I want to
Well,
be.
it definitely does. I mean, I get that like philosophies can be very pure and then there's just a difference with practice.
Yeah. And I feel like this, hopefully this course is a reflection of a lot of my world is Montessori. And then I also bring in other bits of it that I think are really, really valuable. I want to be really respectful of people's time. It's 3:00 right now. If you have to go, you're welcome to come back tomorrow morning. There's just another question, or tomorrow, depending where you are. Tomorrow at noon. Sorry, this is like, I don't know what's happening. Read your email. Don't listen to me. Amy said, I think it would be very hard to have a home 100% Montessori because a home is a home 24 hours as opposed to a school. So when do you turn the work off? So I just want to answer this real quick before we go. Again, you're welcome to go if you need to. I think for me, again, like I said, this is a lifestyle. I think, it's all the time. It's the best we can. We provide this space for the children to do their work. Now, when we're in the classroom, we have a work cycle, and our work cycle is usually in the morning, and it would be for a 3 to 6 classroom, it would be for about 3 hours. And in a toddler classroom, it's about 2 hours. And then you would go outside and have lunch and do the rest of your day. But you would have a concentrated time in the morning where you're doing this work. So I think that if you're at home, the nice thing is you don't have to have a certain time of day. You can choose the time of day when your child is the most focused. Maybe you always do baking projects with the older child in the afternoon when the baby's sleeping. If you have that time, you can turn that into a Montessori moment. So the nice thing is that there's this flexibility with time where you can kind of use it to your advantage. And then on the whole, the environment that you want to present is always one where the child is always going to be able to go and get a washcloth and wipe up a spill. They're always going to know where the broom is. They're always going to be able to go and take their shoes off and put them away. So we're setting up the home for the child to be able to be independent. So there's no real turning it off because we're creating the community that the child can then utilize as they need to, as opposed to the classroom where you're limited to this time frame of what works in the time that you have. You have to do it during this time frame. So I think school you do turn off, but at home when you create this environment, you have to create it where it works for everyone. And we'll talk about that with limit setting more tomorrow too. So I hope that answers Amy. Does anyone have any other questions before we pop off and see each other again tomorrow?
I have a question kind of based off that question. My name is Tori, and
Hi, Tori.
I think prior to COVID, when I guess I'm mostly speaking in an age range, it's 4 years old, so the 3 to 6. It was a lot easier to continue the work when he was in school all day because he was so focused on doing all of that work, and he still wanted to do it when he came home. And so it was a lot easier to also, just in general, to find the time to create the work and all of that goes into it. But it seems like once, COVID hit and we did online learning and all of our learning through Zoom, it's really, really hard to maintain that idea of work throughout the day because he tries to do it in a Zoom setting. But then when we continue it throughout the day, it's in a personal setting, and it hasn't seemed to be working. So I didn't know if you had any, I know that you're mostly speaking from 0 to 3, but if you have any advice on like how to navigate that right now, in like the Zoom setting of not being in school and like still trying to focus on it at home, and that idea of work being, as best as we can all day.
How old is he?
He's 4 right now.
He's 4. Yeah. So this is where my Montessori hat is going to come off, and he's doing like Zoom preschool.
He's at a Montessori based school, but they chose to do it through Zoom. So yeah, right now he's doing, I guess I don't know exactly. I'm not usually with him during that time, but I think it's just like different classes that he would normally be doing. So he's trying to do it through Zoom, but obviously he's not doing it how he would at school because he's not interacting, with
Yeah. So I don't want to speak out of turn because I'm not 0 to 3, I'm not 3 to 6 trained, but I will tell you from my life experience and my personal experience with my own 5-year-old, if we're thinking about the principles of follow the child, right? So we're all in this unprecedented moment in history right now where we're all like, what? Like what are we doing? Like this is
Yeah.
what is going on right now. And so we all have to live through this. And like you're stressed, your parents are stressed, the children are also stressed, and we don't always see this because they're so resilient, right? So we're going to start to see things also, like children aren't meant to spend this much time on a computer. And Montessori, especially, a big piece of Montessori, why we do Montessori and we're so interested in Montessori is because we have the community of children who learn from each other. And we talk about that, the importance of that tactile hands-on stuff that we can't do on a Zoom environment. So this child is missing out on a lot of things. And I think that when we ask a child to do the work on Zoom, and I definitely think there's value to having a relationship with a guide on Zoom or a teacher on Zoom, and there's definitely value to having social relationships if it's on Zoom. That's fine right now, that's okay. But I think what we want to be really careful about is what we're asking our children to do, and the work that we're asking, especially in that age range, what we're asking them to do beyond what they're already doing naturally. So if we're following the child, let's back off, especially if you have a 4-year-old, right? You're not beholden to the state. You don't have to have any requirements for like turning in assignments and reading and writing and spelling. This is me personally, okay? Like I can't speak to everyone. My own child turned 5, 6 days after the state cutoff, and I have never been happier to have a child this exact age with this birthday because we don't have to do anything with the state right now. So like we were in the bathtub, he was in the bathtub the other day and he was like, Mom, I want to do some hundreds equations. And I was like, cool, let me go get a piece of paper and a pen and we can work on that. So we did that. He sat in the bath for a half an hour and we talked about like the ones column and we talked about that and we did the equations and he loved that, like we do baking projects. We do a lot of things. If you, especially at age 4, if you can make games out of things, and you can do that. You don't have to say it's work time. This is our work cycle. We're going to sit down and take this work off the shelf. Because also, I'm telling you from experience, I tried this. We have a whole Montessori environment, 3 to 6, best I could do, in our garage right now because we have a neighbor who's the same age. And I was like, we're going to do this and we're going to have shelves and it's going to be great. And you guys are going to be interested and we want this. And like they did this for like 3 days. And then they were like, we're going to go run around outside. And so I was like, okay, well, it's here. If you want it, we can go do our movable alphabet. It's really nice. You want to come back in? They didn't want to come back in. So I feel like, especially if you have a 4-year-old, there is great value in, someone was just talking about forest school, Meredith, forest school. Like forest school is great. Like if you can get your children outside, there's also a great deal of, I'm going to give away the quiz this week that I just told you about with the what are we missing in our environment. The answer is movement. Okay. Like Montessori, in my opinion, there's not a great amount of movement. And there's studies now showing that movement is correlated with reading readiness. So there is some value to having this concept that like children don't start to learn to read until age 7, right? Like Meredith was saying with Waldorf. There's like how many 7 billion people on planet Earth? Like everyone has a different way of learning and a different way of doing and a different way of understanding. And I think we do the best we can. And then we understand that children are traumatized as we are right now through all of this. And we just have to give them the space to experience that. And I think we have to watch our standards for what we expect of them. And I know that's hard if you're the nanny and then your parents are like, I need them to be reading and writing right now because that's what they're going to be. That's the only way they're going to get ahead. And like, that's tricky. And that's where the communication piece comes in.
Well, I do say this to parents all the time with developmental things, as I remind them, I go, when your child learns to read has no indication of what they're going to be doing at the high school and college level. I go, some kids are able to learn how to read until they're 8 and that's okay. And I try to get that conversation really early. I mean, it's a really personal conversation to me because I have really severe dyslexia and ADHD. So I was that kid with a lot of intervention. So in my profile, I come in as like a special needs kind of background. But I think if you continue to have those conversations with the parents, that especially if they're very goal oriented, because I have worked in that New York environment where they're competitive, especially if you let them know, hey, if they're not reading by age 5.5, that doesn't mean they're not going to Harvard, like from a pragmatic standpoint, I think there is some comfort there if they know like that that it's not going to affect them competitively.
And I think this is true too for like, if you ask a child to hold a pencil too soon and their pincer grasp isn't developed, then it's going to affect the way they hold their pencil the rest of their life, because they're going to try and make these accommodations with their hand because their muscles aren't quite ready to do this. And if you talk to an occupational therapist, they'll say, it's okay. Like you can do all these preparatory activities. You don't have to hold a pencil to learn how to hold a pencil. Like you can do all this other stuff. So I think like that we're not necessarily in the classroom and we're not necessarily doing the work. I think this is why we want to build the community around us, and we want to provide opportunities for independence. And yes, we want the shelf work. And I think, you know, again, the three to 6 is a different age range. 0 to 3, you're going to have a lot easier time of getting children to go and do what they want to do. And when you provide that environment, different developmental stage. But I think that if we provide the environment for them, the hope is that when they're comfortable, they come to it, and we can just keep modeling that. I hope that helps. I know.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I guess another side question, how do you, and again, I know it's 3 to 6, so it might not be something you're as familiar with, but like, how do you, I guess,
yes, Catherine,
like the independence, like how do you foster and like start to foster that independence? Because I think because of COVID, like I said, so much has changed. And like prior to it, I saw like a lot of independence, but because of the circumstances surrounding everything now, like the independence has kind of fallen off track. And like, how can you like motivate children to get like back on that track without, you know, without like, obviously you're observing and like everything, but like fostering more independent play and like just independence in general?
So there are a lot of professionals here, and I want to invite everyone to answer this question. I think one of the ways that I do it is by making it a game. Another way that I do it is by scaffolding. So my own child, and I'm going to be honest with you, I avoid 3 to 6-year-olds because I don't understand how they work. I don't get it. Like I'm in the middle of one right now and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. This is really difficult some days, but now 5 is kind of amazing actually. You know, I think, first of all, my first instinct, again, not Montessori, maybe not Montessori, maybe it is, when the child's asking for something, when a child is asking for attention, when they're doing attention-seeking behavior, let's give them attention. Like there's a reason, especially right now, we're all traumatized. If a child is like acting out, I'm going to go close to them and I'm going to be like, what's happening? There's something happening right now. Let's get through this. I'm with you. We're on the same team. Like we've got this. And so this, you know, I think like if you see that attention seeking behavior, go to that. And I think there's this concept of like, don't give them attention. No. Like, no, they need it. They're doing that because they need that. There's some unmet need. So I think, there's that. And I think in terms of fostering independence, I have a 5-year-old who's very capable of getting undressed and turning on the shower and getting into the shower and getting out of the shower and going to get his pajamas and brushing his teeth and putting himself in bed and looking at books for a half an hour and then turning off the light and going to bed. Never once in his entire life has he ever done that entire routine by himself, because like that's where love comes in, right? Like how do we love people? We care for them. And one of the ways that we can show our children, especially our anxious children right now, who are hearing more than we think that they're hearing about what's going on in the world, is by providing that. Like he asks me every day, will you put my socks on? And most of the time I'm like, yeah, let's do it. I'm happy to put your socks on. And some days I'm like, how about if you put the first one on and then I'll put the second one on? Or how about which part of the socks is tricky for you? I know these socks are tricky for you. Maybe they're too tight. Maybe you need bigger socks. You know, like maybe there's something in the environment that's not working that we need to change. So I think fostering independence is an ongoing conversation. And I'd love to hear what other folks say who are working with 3 to 6-year-olds about how you do that, because that's something I'm one of these people who, like, you know, the sitting on your hands thing, I have to literally physically sit on my hands because I'm one of these people who's like, I'll do it. I'll help you. I'll do it all. What do you want me to do? What's next? And then I get resentful and I don't want to do that. So what does everyone else think about this? I can stay on for about 10 more minutes and then I have to
So I'm not currently working with 3 to 6 age right now, but I was with my last family for 4 years. So I got to kind of see the whole like long-term effects, but how I liked to, so I started fostering dependence when the youngest was, you know, like 6 months old, but her brother was 2.5 and had been receiving like constant engagement with his previous nanny, and kind of you know, helping. I don't know how to say, but so I would set a timer and I would be like, Ryan, I'm going to walk away for 2 minutes right now. And when the timer comes back, you can come back to me. So that, but also I think it's important when you're fostering independence, it's also another opportunity to like develop empathy, because I would like to say like, I need a break right now. You are going to play by yourself. I will come back, but right now I need 5 minutes for me to be by myself and to have some quiet time. I'm right here if you need me, but this is my time right now. And I think it's a good way to also like humanize yourself to your children. And I think that builds independence and also some like social emotional skills that are, I think, very important, obviously. And when I was taking care of these kids, that was not during COVID. So it was different, but I just personally found that to be very helpful, to just kind of hit myself as not just like a caretaker, but also like a person. And I think that allowed them to like develop some, you know, empathy, so to speak. I don't know, but that was just my experience.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. I feel like that self-care is a piece too that we need to consider as nannies that we don't always do. That's valuable. It's a valuable piece of the independence. Inez, were you going to say something?
Yeah, it's just because if you have a younger child that you are taking care of, dressing, the older one will want the same attention. So it's just a phase that I want to be a baby as well, you know? Can you dress me? So it's cute.
Well, that actually reminds me of something. Do you ever use the older sibling say, oh, could you please go, so-and-so needs their jacket buttoned? And my hand, sometimes I'll make something up. Oh, and my hands are sticky right now. I have to wash my hands. And it gets them, if they don't have a habit of taking care of each other, then they'll start to do it. They'll just be like, oh, sure, I'm 5. I can go zip that jacket or whatever. And we know that's why we have the multi-age classroom, right? Or some of you new to Montessori, there's that strength in older children doing things for younger children or modeling. And they actually feel stronger in the activity and are more interested in the activity if they're modeling it for a younger child or doing it for a younger child. So that gets the independence clicking back into place. But Tori, you started this question, right? Of how to get it back in play. One time I even I don't know, it's okay to lie to kids if it's little stuff, you guys. One time when
I disagree. I will never, ever, ever tell a single lie. Never, ever.
Okay. Well, I'm different. I'm a different brand. Okay.
Monica does not speak for me.
So when the 3-year-old was asleep, I wanted to teach the 5-year-old rolling socks. And it wasn't really a flat out lie. It was just kind of like a sales pitch. I said, let's make a video to show your sister how to roll socks. I knew the 3-year-old wasn't developmentally ready to learn how to roll socks. But what happened is the 5-year-old got super excited about making a video for the 3-year-old. So she spent the next 30 minutes, I modeled one more time how to roll socks. And then because it's the age of, selfies and videos, it was like she had her own YouTube channel. She's like, okay, Fitty. And then you do this, and she smoothed it out. We took 3 or 4 different videos. And the thing was, I only did it so she would get immersed in the activity. So, because here I am, I was a Montessori teacher who wanted kids to do that 16-step scrubbing the truck with suds. And I know that the value is in their concentration. So I just said something to kind of inspire her. And she spent 30 minutes rolling socks, so little things like that will get them independent. And then the next week she folded socks, even though I wasn't rolling the iPhone, I wasn't taking a video. But Tori, when you first asked the question, I thought of 2 things I've done with this family that I'm leaving, but not really leaving, and sprinkled Montessori in without calling it Montessori, because sometimes you're with your family where that's what you have to do. I made pictorial charts to help the kids realize things they needed to do. Yes. So this is something, so this will apply to the 1.5-year-old and to the 7.5-year-old, that when we come in the house, we need to put the shoes away and we need to hang up the jacket on the hanger, and that you need to wash your hands. That these are 3 things we do when we come in the house. And so I just went online and just started looking for free graphics, I'm sure you could probably pay for prettier ones, but I just downloaded, or I just drew a hanger and a really simple jacket. And I made really simple pictures, and it's hanging on the back of the closet door. And there was a time where there was a chart that when you did each thing, you got a sticker, and then we got away from that. And now they're just pictures. So there's things like that you can do with, there you go.
I'm going to show you this. I just made this for my child. This is how we go outside. This is an independence thing. I also bought a laminator because I laminate a lot of stuff, I guess. It's a good tool to have. So I made this. I just pulled all the actual things that he wears when he goes outside. Those are like, that's the color of his snow pants. That's the hoodie that he puts on. You can't see all of it, sorry. But I just found these images and I put them in a doc, and I wrote the words. So I wrote the language with it that says, 1, 2 pairs of pants, 2 socks, 3 sweater, 4 snow pants. So it's teaching order, right? It's having him read this list, and it's also showing him independence. So it's an opportunity now. And now he used to say to me, can you help me? I don't know what to do next. I don't know what to do. And so now he's like, oh, I'm going to go. I already have 2 pairs of pants on. Now I'm not going to wear any gloves today because it's not too cold. So I'm just going to go get my jacket. So then he's like, well, we're going to go outside, and he loves doing it independently. He just needed the tool to be able to do it. So that was like, that's an environment piece, right? That sometimes you forget about, like, oh, maybe there's something in the environment that I haven't thought about that's impeding this independence.
Hey.
So that it took me by surprise too. I was surprised how much he loved that. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Monica. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. My second thing I was going to say that I've been doing for independence, it's kind of longer, so we might just have to bookmark it for now, but it's thinking of activities that are Montessori compatible. Because Tori, I don't know. Oh, you said that 4-year-old is doing it online, which I have like serious feelings about, but what you're going to end up doing, and it's probably killing their Montessori teachers inside that they have to do that, by the way. So nothing against that school trying to keep things going. But what you have to do somehow is create the life of, remember, you don't explain anything to the brain that you didn't give to the hand first. You have to kind of create that. And so I don't recommend the family going out and buying a Montessori services catalog and trying to recreate Montessori school at home. But what you want to do is find other fine motor things they can do and create an art center or a literacy center that's really simple. It could be like 4 activities of each.
Okay, get to the kitchen.
Yeah, the kitchen, of course. But things like a light bright. If you don't have a baby around where the little things would be dangerous, a light bright. Instead of metal insets in the classroom, what about, those spirograph things that used to be really popular?
Oh, yeah. My kid loves those. Yeah.
Those are great. And it requires a lot of fine motor concentration. There are these links that they sell on, you can get them on Amazon. They're like, they're gummed on one side. So you can just like a stamp, and you can make like a ring, and you can make paper chains. So all they need in that basket are those strips and like a little sponge that they would get wet. And then so they could just sit there and like make like 20 chain, like, and every day try to make it longer. So what you have to do is kind of think of Montessori compatible things, because the Montessori teacher is trying to do golden beads and things like that, sandpaper letters. God bless her. How is she doing that on Zoom? But you have to give the activity to the hand that the Zoom teacher isn't able to give.
Yeah, that's
you don't want it to be the exact things. Yeah.
I also have found with my child, if any of you have older children, I'm sure you do, Tori, one of the things that has helped in our house is having a calendar. So I actually found the exact calendar they had at school. And I think about how much of my day I spend thinking about what time it is or what day it is and what's happening in my schedule based on knowing that is very grounding for me. And so my child would say to me every day, we have movie night, Saturday night's movie night. It's tonight. I'm so excited. And he would say to me every day, is it movie night now? Is it movie night? Is it Saturday now? Is it Saturday now? And I was like, we got to get this calendar. So now every single day, and I laminated it because I love to laminate things just like at school, and I put the Velcro on it. And every single day we put the day on the calendar. And in our house now we're doing Advent. So, just because it's another way of like tracking time and it's fun. So now every day he puts the day on the calendar, and then he goes and looks in his little Advent book at what's next. And it's been very grounding. And so now he'll say to me, it's 2 days. It's 2 days until movie night. And he'll say, tomorrow's a Nana day because Nana's coming on Tuesday. And so having that is very, very grounding. And I think that also helps with his independence because he doesn't have to ask me where he is in space and time. Now he knows. And we got a little clock for him on the wall. And it's like a learning to read the time clock. So now he can say, it's 3 o'clock, it's 2.5 hours, well, not 2, he won't say it's 2.5 hours to dinner, but he understands more about the time that he is in because we have these grounding opportunities for him to track exactly what's happening, which is another thing that surprised me at how into that he was. And he still is. This has been going on like 2 months now that we've been tracking this, and he loves the calendar.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for everything.
Yeah. It's interesting. And I'm sure, it's a really interesting question. I think it's a concept that comes through in Montessori all the time. And I'm sure that it impacts a lot of people. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna run away because my little baby who was crying before is gonna wake up from their nap in 5 minutes, and I want to go be with them. Thank you all so much. I'm really excited for tomorrow. We're
Yeah,
gonna
thank
do a lot
you.
more stuff.
Thank you.
Eleni, thanks for staying. Sorry, I didn't mean for you to stay. I should have said you can go. I can.
I'm in it. I'm
Okay.
here.
Thank you, Eleni.
Yeah, of
Thank you.
course. And we'll be back tomorrow. Not next week,
Tomorrow.
but tomorrow.
Check your email and send a picture of your environment if you haven't already and you want to.
Okay.
Isn't tomorrow technically next week?
Stop. Don't confuse people. It's tomorrow. Do that.
In 21
say
hours,
that.
report to duty.
That's right. Thank you so much, everyone. It's really great to share time with you.
Yeah. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We'll see you tomorrow.
Okay. Thanks a lot for your hard work.
Bye.